Welcome back to the Something About Soccer podcast, episode 4. I am Dill40K, and I'm joined today by BizarraBrigade.
What's going on, everybody?
And Pixelatedsuits.
Hello, everybody.
We got a great episode planned for you guys today. 2 more weeks have passed in the MLS, 2 and 3, as well as some interesting U.S. men's national team stuff. Biz is going to take us down a deep dive into some ticket prices around Messi. We're going to be talking about some goalkeepers, a little bit of MLS abroad, and obviously a grab bag of topics in regards to a bunch of the MLS games going on. But I would love for us to kind of get started on something that's very present. It happened today. The official U.S. men's national team call-up for the CONCACAF Nations League semifinal and hopefully, well, what am I supposed to say? Maybe. I don't want to say maybe as a U.S. men's national team fan. Final against either Canada or Mexico. And the one thing I want to highlight at the top before I go to picks and biz, 6 MLS guys in Pochettino's first, I wouldn't say first like competitive roster, but it feels like he's had time to kind of acclimate himself. He's had a few camps where he's been able to get a wide range of players. He's had his very own January cupcake camp or MLS camp, whatever you want to call it. And obviously, some of the stuff that he said to those guys rang true. I remember watching a video. I don't know if you guys, let me ask you this. Did you guys see that behind-the-scenes video of Pochettino during that January camp? I think the U.S. men's national team put it up, maybe the MLS. There were some interesting bits about that.
Interviews, yeah. I think I only saw some interviews on what he was saying. But, I'm a big fan of the January camp. We've talked about it before on the podcast. I think episode 1, we covered it a little bit. And some of the watch parties that we've done, we covered it a little bit. But I'm a huge fan of the January camp. And I think that, the January camp has shown itself in the March call-ups. And I think that that's the beauty of the January camps and that it is something meaningful and that these players, potentially this is their only opportunity to be wearing the USMNT colors. They show themselves in the best light and, they could get called up for, potentially the only home World Cup that they'll be able to play in. And that's something that shouldn't be understated is that, these players have to give it their all every opportunity they get because this is potentially the only World Cup on their home turf. So, and having a place of building soccer from the ground up and being part of that team to do so and represent it. I feel like a lot of the players from, the World Cup in 1994 talk a lot about, the growth or maybe the lack thereof of soccer in 94. I think, obviously there's a lot to be criticized about Lawless, but I feel like he talks a lot about, soccer during that time. And I think that his insight, as a player during that time, I think every player who, is born in the U.S. or represents the U.S., that's exactly what they want to do. And I think the January camp was, the perfect stage to do so.
Biz, I saw you shaking your head. I assume you're a fan of the January camp as well?
Yeah, I think this is the first real opportunity that we've had to see how Pochettino rewards some of those fringe players with how they, what output they provide during those types of camps. So you have on this roster itself, the players that were named, we were chatting about it in our, kind of our group chat earlier when we saw it. And I mean, you have an opportunity now for Diego Luna, who was dubbed Diego Big Balls Luna from Poch in the post game presser. That made everybody laugh and like all of our hearts soar. And we literally posted about it on Twitter because we're just so. I mean, we've all been so enamored with Diego Luna the person, but also his play style and what he provides to a team is, I think, what fuels a lot of that with just I think like the work rate and just kind of the fight that guy has, just the attitude, just kind of has like that winning attitude. So seeing that actually be carried out through a January camp and then also on top of that be rewarded. I mean, 2 months ago, we were talking about, was Diego Luna going to go play for Mexico? So, I mean, I think that's something that's really, really cool to see when that comes to it. And do you have something to say on that, Dill, before?
Yeah, no.
I had a couple more I was going to go, but feel free.
No, because I was referencing that because you bring up a good point. Like Pochettino in one of those behind-the-scenes videos in the locker room, I think it was like after one of the trainings, he made it very clear to this group, the group in the January camp, you are playing for a spot in a couple months. Like you can earn your spot on. And I think, the January camp has always been divisive for U.S. men's national team fans. I think there's a certain contingent who think it's kind of pointless because they think that we should get away from some of the MLS players. I think that's a bit of an overreaction. I get it to an extent where, the MLS isn't the same quality as some of these other leagues, but American players are going to start somewhere, and they can't really, pick where they're born and where they start in their academies and start their careers to an extent. So there's definitely going to be guys, and a lot of, a good amount of our players, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, guys like that have come through that similar system. So it warms my heart to see him saying that in the locker room and that actually be rewarded with players like, you mentioned Luna, and I'll mention the other guys before I let you continue. Patrick Schulte from the Columbus Crew and Zach Steffen from the Colorado Rapids, the two keepers. I think those two made sense because of our goalkeeper depth.
Our goalkeeper situations.
It's weird.
Right now.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Tim Ream, who Pochettino has a really funny relationship in those behind-the-scenes videos as well. Always joking about his age. He mentioned to a lot of those players in that same speech that the career of a soccer player isn't that long unless you're Tim Ream, who's playing, who plays like a 28-year-old.
The Chuck Norris of the U.S. men's national team.
Exactly. And then I'll let you jump in here with Augumeng, a hero from the January camp, and a guy with the same name as you that you've grown to love as well, and you've made me start to love him, Brian White. So two strikers.
He's my alter ego. Yeah. He's Brian with an I, so he's my alter ego.
Never seen them in the same room together.
He's the dark side.
You're Brian Whiter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm a Scandinavian brother. No, I don't. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the two that I wanted to highlight too, because Patrick Ajuman and Brian White are both players that I think were other examples outside of Diego Luna that really hit the ground running in the January camp. I think for all of us that are kind of in the MLS sicko category of watching as many games as we have, I think Brian White's been kind of one of the best little kept secrets in the MLS for some time now, probably for a couple of years, where he kind of burst on the scene. He's been a journeyman, and then Vancouver, it just kind of something clicked, and he'd be what you would describe as a late bloomer, which I feel like the U.S. rosters always seem to have those guys at some point, specifically around this time when you start to see these camps start to get more and more important as you ramp up towards a World Cup. You start to see some of these guys start to surface. I think a lot of times too, and we touched on it earlier, Dill, where we were talking about how is this even pertinent to the whole striker battle for going into the World Cup.
You made a good point with 4 spots. I wasn't even thinking about it that way, because I feel like with U.S. strikers, there's always been 3 that are kind of locked in, and then the 4th, thinking of a 4th has always been hard.
And on top of it too, it's really up to Poch. It's dependent on what the roster distribution. It's going to all be based on the style of play that we're running at the time, where you feel like you need more depth in certain spots. Obviously, I think a lot of those, because when they're listing it, it's going to be midfielders, forwards, and defenders. So a lot of those forwards, I think a lot of that extra leeway goes to wingers typically. But I think there's a really, with the injury history of a couple of the players currently on our striker force, I would not think it was completely out of the question that you did bring a 4th person. So I don't think that that's necessarily even a guarantee. I think oftentimes 3 is kind of the normal number, but it's not unheard of with, Ricardo Pepe, who's constantly had injuries. Balogun's been hurt in the last year. Josh Sargent is constantly hurt. I think bringing a 4th, just on your base roster is not out of the question, especially with a couple of those guys potentially playing more like an inside forward role in certain spots too, based on how Poch chooses to run things. I know, but you could also make the argument too with that, not to get really deep into the tactical intricacies of what Poch is doing too, that you could also make the argument that Tim Weah could also serve that purpose and play up top in a pinch too if you needed it. So
the interesting thing about Weah is he's played wing back
everywhere,
wide midfield, wing, striker at Juventus. And I'll just add a little bit of context, too, before I'd like to get Pix's opinion on maybe some of his highlights on the MLS guys as well. To round out the roster for goalkeepers, Matt Turner from Crystal Palace joins the 2 MLS guys. Defenders-wise, we get the pair from Celtic, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty. We get Joe Scally from Gladbach, Anthony Robinson, obviously from Fulham, Chris Richards, also from Palace, Mark McKenzie, who's a guy that we've been talking about a good amount, one of the best defenders in the French First Division on a really good Toulouse defense. And a really random one, to be honest, not what I was expecting, Marlon Fossey from Standard Liège, who kind of gives you that wing-back look that you kind of miss with Serginho Dest, who actually returned back to action for PSV from his ACL injury. In the midfield, we got Tyler Adams from Bournemouth, Johnny Cardoso, who was a hero against Real Madrid, Weston McKennie from Juventus, Gio Reyna from Borussia Dortmund, Tanner Tessman from Lyon, who's been kind of up and down, but he's a flexible player. I think he can play a couple different positions in defense.
Yeah.
And then to round out the forwards, Yunus Musa and Pulisic from AC Milan, Tim Weah from Juventus, and Josh Sargent, who I don't know if there's been another game, but in his last 8 games for Norwich, maybe 9, 8 goals. So just absolutely cooking in the championship. But picks, any of these MLS guys stand out to you for this call up? We all watched the January camp games together.
Yeah.
Watching Augustine score. I think we watched Brian White score. I know we definitely missed him miss a one of those sitters.
White had one in the January camp. White had one.
Yeah, I think as opposed to highlighting like a single player or select players, I think that something that unites them all and kind of ties the same thread is that all these guys, and I think that this is something that, really comes into the January camp, is all these guys have an insane engine on them. They're all workhorses, and that's what you need out of the MLS guys, where, a lot of those players may not be, and a lot of USMNT fans might even say they might lack some of the technical element, or they might lack some qualities that you might need, or some things that might lack, but they make up for it, in my opinion, and I think probably Poch's opinion as well, in their work rate and in their ability to just keep on going and keep persisting. And that's something that you kind of see throughout all the MLS call-ups, because there are some MLS players that maybe were left out that might be a little bit more technical, but they don't have that work rate that kind of works in the USMNT system. And I think that's even highlighted by, the fact that Tim Ream is still being called up, because I think that is, Mr. Work Rate in a sense.
He's playing right back for Charlotte. Right back or
left back? Left back. Yeah.
So
that's going to stop. They just brought in a left back finally on loan. I think it was kind of out of necessity, but still, it's looked goofy.
But exactly what I mean, where it's just like, these are the players where it's like old, young, it doesn't matter. I think that's the common thread that ties them all. And even with some of the picks that were, surprising, and Fossey, who isn't an MLS player, but one that was called from the French league, I think that's one of the players who are someone who's, super hardworking, and that's what you need from a national team.
I cut in just because when you made that point, I thought of one notable exclusion. Also, Fossey from the Belgian league, not the
okay.
But Brandon Aronson, who is kind of known to be the engine guy, I think people don't give him as much credit as they should for his technical ability. He still is very good technically, but he has such a high work rate. He's kind of like that pesty type player. I mean, he probably is not in. I mean, he's weird. He plays the 10, he plays the 8, he can play the wing. He's probably best as a 10, so it's probably why he doesn't fit in there.
Yeah, he's a casualty of a position, in my opinion. Yeah,
but it's interesting because Luna kind of fills that same role as well. I feel like they play the same position. So to see Luna kind of come in, I feel like Luna kind of came in over Aronson in that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a like for like.
Yeah, something I'm actually realizing is that another one who wasn't called up is Zendejas, but I don't think that there's any Liga MX players at all. So it's kind of surprising where Poch is kind of, I don't know, like a lot of people, and I think that there's still this struggle of Liga MX versus MLS in quality, and I think that battle is still going on today, and we're still seeing it even tonight with some of the Champions League games. But the fact that there are no call-ups from Liga MX and there's 6 from the MLS is, a real statement, especially with players like Zendejas and Vasquez being left out and omitted. So I think Pochettino's probably keeping an eye out more on the MLS games, which I think is obviously more important because it's the domestic league of the country that you're managing. But, the omission of any Liga MX player is a little bit surprising, especially when, the U.S. kind of has to position itself as a team that does call up those players in Mexico. So you get them to, declare themselves for the U.S. and get them on board. But on the other hand, keeping those players in like Diego Luna and keeping them in the MLS so that they do play for the U.S. is kind of the other side of the coin. So it's kind of interesting to see, what it's going to look like for that USMNT roster for the World Cup or for the finals of it's Nations League, right?
Yep. Nations League semifinals is what they're going into right now. So,
but after that, it would still just be Nations League. So the roster for that, it's gonna be interesting to see if they do any changes for that too.
Yeah.
Before we move from this topic, I'm gonna ask you both the same question. Of the 3 teams left outside the U.S., Panama, Canada, Mexico, Biz, I'm gonna ask you first. Who do you think presents the biggest challenge?
I'll rank them for you. I'll do even better. I'll do Canada, Panama, Mexico. I would want to see Mexico in the final 100% with how it's looked lately. That is a team that just has not troubled us as of late. On top of it too, I think just like what we present against them with some of the technical ability, I think also troubles them. They just do not, for whatever reason, do not have any. Anytime Christian plays them, I mean, it's a known thing down in their media. They do not like Christian Pulisic. Like that is a guy that is like one of those nightmare-inducing people, similar to what I feel like for us it was at the heights of like Chicharito's powers and you know Gio dos Santos's power. Like those guys that were like when it was kind of El Tree dancing on us a little bit, like at certain points when they were winning couple straight years in a row of fixtures. It's kind of the same thing right now for us, where we're going through that period where they just don't have an answer for him. Like, and it's pretty apparent. Panama has been a thorn in our side now for, I mean, honestly, like a decade. like even when we were like, you know, when we haven't necessarily had incredibly tough stretches, that is such a well-drilled, well-coached team that has somehow managed to glide past a golden generation and just carry out that momentum and continue to be like, there's a really realistic possibility that you could like convince me to rank them in the top 3 of CONCACAF right now. I would still give it to Mexico, but like for us in our matchups, I definitely am more afraid of them just based on like what they've done to us in the past. Like I mean, it's just been nightmares. Some of our worst losses have been to them. And then, yeah, Canada, I mean, the most technically skilled team outside of us in the Confederation, in my opinion. And I think that's easy to see. And now with Marsh there, they play a little bit differently as well. And that's even, I think, a little bit more intimidating. So, yeah. What about you, Pix?
Yeah, no, I think that you have the rankings perfectly. But just to add, I think that the really interesting thing and the scariest thing about Panama is that without the MLS, I don't think Panama would be as scary as it is, because a lot of those players are developing within the MLS and learning to play against those American players and learning the styles of the American soccer.
They know,
and even, you know,
Ream's tricks.
Exactly, and adopting it. They're stealing the dark arts from the US, you know, directly. So it's a little bit of you know, you're making the league one of the best in North America, but at the cost of, you know, your competitors are fighting against you.
You're building CONCACAF in general, right? So,
Yeah.
because it really Panama, I think, seen probably one of the wider benefits, but I mean, you're seeing it with I mean, various different levels of it. I mean, Hondurans, El Salvadorians, you know, Jamaicans, like so many different types of players that have had careers here. I mean, like look at how long Andre Blake's been here. Kamara Lawrence for how can you not? How can you not? Yeah. How can you not? But yeah, but I think that's a great point, Pix, because it really is. But yeah, I would springboard off that and say it really is like you would say Liga MX has done that, I think, as the main culprit for years for anyone that was good enough to get there. But now MLS with, I think, like kind of the academies that have developed into it. I mean, Mexico sending players here to develop in our academies because
I know, that's really interesting.
Such an like, I don't want to say that they don't exist, but they're just not as well received as what some of the LA academies are looking like, just with the facilities and what's provided there, and you know some of the coaching that's been pulled in over the last decade, where it's looking more consistent with results probably than what Mexico's been able to create. I mean, the results, proof's in the pudding. You're seeing what the U.S. the last couple generations of U.S. players are versus what Mexico is currently dealing with, like where there's just, I mean, I think the last point I'll say on it was the fact that we had, out of all of the rosters, all of the players that were on European rosters right now, and Mexico, out of the 4 teams, us, Panama, Canada, Mexico, Mexico had the least amount of players out of that 4, which, I mean, Panama having more than Mexico, in what world is that possible? Yeah, that's a thing. Like that's almost mind blowing to me that's a real stat. But man, it wasn't like by a couple. It was like by a lot. It was by like double digits. Like so, it's like I would not have been able to tell you that Panama had that many people overseas right now playing. That's unbelievable. So it shows that it's a testament to the focus and shift in style, because that is, I mean, through and through, out and out, that is a baseball country, man. Yeah, so the fact that country even cares and gives 2 shits about soccer, it's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, and then the other big thing is, you know, obviously with Canada, the whole political implications of even, you know, Jesse March even had a little speech that he had to the president of the United States. So like the getting all the Canada on board and creating like the us versus them mentality, and especially Jesse March being American, I think it's like so interesting with the ideas.
It's a really weird dynamic.
Yeah, especially because I think Jesse March, you know, obviously I think Pochettino is better, but I think, you know, Jesse March was often considered for potentially being, you know, one of the managers for the USMNT.
Definitely.
So it's like, you know, beat US and, you know, that might be your job after the World Cup, Jesse March. So
Also,
I wonder now with sour grapes if he would even take it, to be honest with you.
That's
I
true.
don't know.
That's true.
it might be you just would want to take Canada to the top. I mean, me personally, I would love to see Canada in the final. I think one key thing about this U.S. Team going into the next World Cup is we don't have to qualify for it. So I want us to be tested as hard and as much as we can. And I think playing the best team in the final is ideal. Obviously, in a different world where we are qualifying, I'd rather play Mexico, like Biz said, because I think that is the easiest matchup for us. But I also want the revenge on Canada in that last game that we lost, and we did not look great. Canada looked really good against us, and I think they have two of the best players in the entire CONCACAF region in Davies and David. And one last thing before we move into the main segment, David really looking like he's going to leave on a free from Lille and probably join a really big team in the summer. So I'm super excited for that. But yeah, that is the U.S. men's national team call up for the next slate of games. That starts next week. This episode's coming out on Friday, so those games will not have been played. Semifinal versus Panama at SoFi, and Canada or Mexico in the final, also at SoFi. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, let's get into MLS weeks 2 and 3 right now. The main topic is what you came for. Wow! All right, guys, I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Maybe not for Philadelphia fans who are very, very excited, but the Union, absolutely dominant in the Eastern Conference, led by Ty Bariba with 5 goals in 3 games. Biz, early thoughts on Philly? The thing that I've taken away from this team so far is they're pressing like crazy. It's honestly pretty extreme how much they're pressing. They do give up chances, but offensively, the volume of shots that they're putting in, I think you saw it the least in week 3 of the 3 games, but especially against Cincy, that was not the game I was expecting them to dominate so crazy, especially because Cincy's such a high power ranked team. We were high on them going into the season. What do you think now that we're 3 weeks in on Philly?
So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on Philly, to be honest with you. The one thing I will say is, no, I did not expect this out of the gates. So credit to where credit is due. I think and I would say even how you kind of presented this, I even think Philly fans, Benny, who is in our community and in our chat, I know he was very down on the team with Curtin leaving and just kind of an ambiguous situation on we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants and just trusting in what the front office is choosing to do with going with pretty much going with the kids and kind of what we've had already here, despite finishing pretty poorly last year. So there wasn't a lot of hope. This was a team that was kind of a trendy wooden spoon dead last pick. They really were not expected to do much this year. So it coming out like gangbusters like this and employing this style under Bradley Carnell, that was, really that he brought with him from that St. Louis first place finish over in St. Louis City in their first season. Bradley Carnell, I think a lot of people were really critical of the fact that he was let go in his second season and didn't have that long of a leash. So now bringing this to Philly, where you have a lot of youngsters that might have the legs a little bit more to be able to actually run that press a little bit more diligently and have the depth in the rotation, because the youth academy is something that's
Sullivan, man. He's
right. That's
season,
That's the I have 3 names written down. I have Kai Wagner, Ty Baribo, and then Quinn effing Sullivan is what I wrote down on my sheet right now, because it really is. It's, if you're looking at the metrics and the deep underlying numbers. So you alluded to Baribo, 5 goals in 3 games. It's leading MLS right now. I will say Kai Wagner's leading in cross conversion and he's up there in the assist tallies. I think he has 2, but he was 100th percentile on crosses completed. It's just, they're just funneling shots and crosses into the box. It's just nonstop. And then Sullivan was in the top 90th percentile in every single pressing metric that you can have from success.
And you see that.
So
You
do. And it's very clear what the definitive, if you're looking through, I took a little bit of time because I haven't really had a chance to watch Philly. A lot of the games have been, I've watched them in very segmented through a couple where I've been watching a lot of the slate kind of synonymously together. So I haven't had an opportunity to be able to watch them in full, but it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to try to do over these next couple of weeks and make sure that I get a full 90 of them and truly kind of understand what is the cause of this? Are there players that are underlying that aren't getting their say? Because the numbers tell the story with their pressing metrics. It's kind of a we, not an I type of team, which is really cool. It's not like driven by one person. I think Baribo is the kind of like the sum of the whole with that goal scoring output. If you actually look at his XG, I think he's sitting on expected. It's like 2. Yeah. Wow. So I don't necessarily know how sustainable it is too from his side of things, but I do know as well that a lot of those are just tap-ins. So it's showing that the system is working. And then, the last thing I'll say on it was the fact that you had mentioned about the Cincinnati result. I'll kind of cool and kind of fan the flames of that one a little bit and say, like, I won't have it be like incendiary that Philadelphia is so good and Cincinnati is so bad. I would say, like, kind of temper what you think about that one solely because Cincy was coming off of the CONCACAF Champions League that midweek. And I think when you're facing a press like this that early in the season, when you're on double duty and trying your best to try to pull points out of both, since he kind of did the no where they're not rotating and tried to do both sides of it, and it didn't work out either way, really. So I do think that was really apparent towards the tail end where if you look at the underlying numbers of that game too, I don't think the 4-1 necessarily reflects like how like Philly was this dominant force in it. I just think like since he just ran out of gas at the end and it became evident with the last couple of tallies. But all in all, Philly A+ from me, man. I mean, what more could you ask for?
I mean, credit to Philly for pressing like that against a team that is on tired.
Right.
And that's what it felt like in the game. It was like that oppressive multi-man press every time a person in the back four of Cincy would touch the ball. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This feels like Football Manager, high press, high line, attack, attack. I was like, I kind of felt bad for Cincy. But Pix, on the Eastern Conference as well, as a Red Bulls guy, what are you feeling about Philly? And I don't know when Red Bulls play them, but...
Yeah, we play them a little bit late, I think. Okay. We play them maybe like third to last or something like that, so...
Two-pronged question. Where are you on the Philly hype train right now? And how would you feel about Red Bulls playing them in the state that you're in and the state that they're in?
That's a really good question. I think that...
Thank you.
I got to give credit to where it's due. I think Philadelphia have been really good lately. I think that the other issue, and I think that Biz brought up, one side of the coin, but the other side of the coin would be, what would Philadelphia look like if they had been in, CCC or anything like that, where they had to travel? Would they be able to employ that high press system? The answer for the most part would be, they wouldn't be able to employ it to the effect that they have been now. But, that's just a what if. But it's still something that we should mention, where it's just like there's a lot of teams, just like Cincinnati, who was tired, who won't be able to employ that system because of the fact that they have those super consistent games, and also their lack of rotation.
They were bad on purpose last year to prepare for this season.
Exactly, and come out swinging.
That's premonition right there. Yeah.
But overall, I think that Philadelphia have been really good. I think that Biz is very correct in saying that the Cincy result is a little bit. The scoreline doesn't reflect exactly, the game itself or really the full story. I think that Philadelphia have also been given a few, easier games. They haven't been giving too many tests. I think that New England, although, on the road, I think that, I think Philadelphia should have won there with their form. Orlando City was high scoring, but I think that with the form that Philadelphia are in and kind of how they've built themselves, and obviously with hindsight, the 4-2 makes sense. So I think that, I'm going to be excited for them to face more challenging teams. In 2 weeks from now, they have St. Louis. So that's going to be really interesting, kind of comparing both two super high press styles and seeing,
utter chaos,
exactly. Yeah. Because Cincinnati weren't able to do the press back because they were tired. So it's going to be interesting to see how St. Louis look, trying to press back.
It kind of reminds me on the Western Conference side, San Jose were a bit of a surprise through 2 weeks, and my question mark was for them, well, they're playing two pretty bad teams in Sporting KC and Real Salt Lake in the first 2 weeks, and, there's a layup right there to say that they're doing it again in week 3, but, I'm not going to do that to Biz. Minnesota gutted one out in week 3, and San Jose definitely looked a bit less of the team that they were in the first 2 weeks. Biz, do you have any thoughts on that game? You obviously watched all of it, so.
Yeah, of course I did. I wouldn't be repping the jersey otherwise. No, I would be regardless.
The jersey with a name on the back. They made that very adamantly clear.
I'll tell you this: if Kelvin Yeboah keeps up his form, I might get a Yeboah jersey if we're talking this point. Holy smokes, man! No, we have definitely, I think, we've pinpointed a style. We've identified this 5-3-2 that is really content with giving away and just kind of sitting back and not dealing with possession much and attacking on the counter and doing some counter press in certain pockets and being selective on it. When and where we are, being selective on what, whoever has the ball on the back line, that's when we strike and try to spring the press and make them make mistakes. And I think as of right now, it's worked. I mean, we've given up 1 goal in 3 games. And for anybody that follows Minnesota United lore, that is a pretty foreign concept since our inauguration in the league, having owned up until Cincinnati came into the league and now San Jose breaking it last year. We were the proud owners of like some of the worst defensive records in MLS. So us being a top end defensive team has been kind of a new concept over the last few years. But yeah, it's refreshing. And I think there was some frustration with us coming out of the game after Montreal, because I think I'll explain it like this 5-3-2 that we have, I think is really a great thing when we're on the road or we're playing a team that does want to have possession more than us, solely for the fact that I think they're playing right into our hands. We are so defensively solid with how we're set up. Realistically, the way that you have to break us down is you're going to have to just like really lean into playing like long diagonal balls and like try to connect those passes, because it's so hard to be able to like quickly rotate around it, because those 3 are malleable and they can move from side to side and really take whatever point of contact you're trying to take on those outside spots. And then, you're so staunch down the middle where there's just nowhere to go within that, with obviously a center defensive mid just sitting in the middle, and then two players that are constantly moving with the press, and three center backs back there with wing backs as well. It's like you're just not going to break that down organically unless you have a really solid elite midfield, which there's a couple of those in the MLS, but they're not.
I got to give when you speak about that, I got to give a shout to Boxall has been an absolute beast.
Yeah,
I love this guy.
Guy is absolutely like just a timeless classic, man. I will say, for us, me and my brother were actually talking about this a couple weeks back, and we've talked about like our Mount Rushmore being that we're a Mount Rushmore of players, being that we're a newer team, and who would be on that, because we are in our infancy still, and we don't have a lot of those players. And Boxall was a name that was thrown around, and definitely I would say at this point, with how much he's done for the team, how long he's been here, how important he's been for a lot of our runs, I would put him on there now at this point, with how like he's our captain now. I think it's deserved. Like, and yeah, the guy he had bounced around the MLS a little bit and kind of done the journeyman thing, but yeah, just a consummate professional. He's like the exact person you want to be your captain. Every time you hear an interview with the guy, you're just like, I never leave our club, please, man. Like, you're just the greatest person. Always gives his time after the games to fans and stuff like that too. Just one of those great people. So yeah, really happy for him with him having the continued success. And I feel like it's evident that Eric Ramsey also knows that. And like, there's a reason why we've, I think, kind of set up a style to have those types of players on the field. So yeah, we have a identifiable way of playing in this 5-3-2. We're going to beat teams by having about 30% possession, but we might outshoot you. Like, it's really a weird concept, but we are very good at it. We have two really solid strikers. One, I think that I would say is even elite in MLS, in Kelvin Yeboah, and then one in Tanny that I'm sensing we're in sophomore slump mode right now. With
it feels
kind of
that way. It feels that way.
But we're waiting to see what that comes from. So yeah, I'll take 6 points out of 3 games, with those games being LAFC. And I think if you would have told me before the season, that's where I would have expected us to be honest with you, because San Jose, no one expected to be as good as they are. And Montreal, I would have expected to win at home. So I think we've done exactly what I would have expected us to do at this point, if I'm being honest from a forecasting standpoint.
I like that. All right, staying in the cold and staying in the West for a little bit, I'd like to touch a little bit on Vancouver continuing their strong run, winning in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and against Galaxy in Week 2. Jaden Nelson and Brian White trending up. Jaden Nelson obviously picked up a little bit of a knock and didn't play in the last game, and obviously Brian White now in the USMNT situation for, obviously some real big boy games upcoming. Yeah. Picks, I'm curious. You're the Eastern Conference guy. How much do you pay attention to the Western Conference? Do you completely ignore it as the inferior conference, that I feel like the NBA is the worst with that. The Western and Eastern Conference conversation is always like that. I don't know. I'll come to you after, Biz, but Pix, do you feel that in a Western Eastern Conference at the MLS? Do you feel like one is superior to the other? And, give some thoughts on Vancouver too.
Yeah, of course. I think that the biggest thing about the Eastern versus Western conferences divide is that it's so, like, as we've said with all these teams, is that, at the drop of a hat, at the change of a season, at one transfer, teams can change completely through their power rankings, and that's the same thing with divisions too. So you can kind of see that even where it's just like, I've never really thought that there's really, because it's always like there's one or two teams that are super bad, but you could throw, if you got away with divisions, then everyone would kind of just be pretty even, I would say. And then there's some teams that do big rebuilds, like San Jose did. I think New England has been trying to do that too. Obviously Philadelphia, is a team that we weren't expecting to do that well, but like we've said, that there's just a bunch of teams that surprise us, like Vancouver as well. So I've never really felt that there's like Eastern versus Western supremacy in one versus the other, but I am glad that there is that rivalry and that there is that kind of sense of pride in a sense. But then touching on Vancouver, it's pretty hard for me to catch Vancouver games because they're pretty late.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
it's starting at 10:30 for you most nights, to be honest. Whenever they're the late game.
That being said, they've really surprised me this season. But the biggest question that I have is going to be, what does Vancouver look like without Brian White when he is at those national team camps?
And Ryan Gauld.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so it's two huge pieces that you're taking out of the team, and I think that two pieces that I don't know how Vancouver are going to be able to cope without them, because they're so central to the team and so important to how, in the same way that Ricky Puig moves Galaxy, I think that those players move Vancouver. So it's going to be interesting, and I think that if any of these players get injured at one of the international camps, then Vancouver's season could change, and I think that could be said about a lot of MLS teams. Especially with the DP rule being, where you most of the time you are getting these players called up to national teams.
Yeah. Well, you brought it up, and I'm not looking forward to talk about it, but it must be talked about. 0 points at the bottom of the table. Worst team in the MLS through 3 games.
Hey, one of the worst. Give yourself some credit.
I mean, I want to be at the bottom so that we can only go up from there.
All right.
The LA Galaxy are bad, and obviously it was to be expected. A lot of injuries, a lot of roster turnover. We talked about it a good amount during the watch party that we did live together just this past Sunday, watching St. Louis absolutely drub us at home. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That was painful. Quick few points from my perspective as a fan. What I've noticed through the first 3 weeks, I don't think these are, revolutionary takes on the Galaxy. I think anyone with eyes can notice these things. We have absolutely no offense, it feels like. Just no chance creation consistently. We were creating chances against St. Louis, and Burki, who Pix is going to talk about a little bit, had a team of the week performance, according to FOTMob, in the goalkeeper spot. So, it did open up for us a little bit, but I expected us to, be... I don't know. I expected us to be on the opposite end of a result like this, but that lack of a midfield again that we highlight with no Delgado now, that's really hurting. No Brugman.
Yeah.
And then the lack of consistency offensively with no Painsil, no Ricky Puig. Joveljic now being gone, and our new striker Nascimento being injured till the end of March, and we're relying on Miguel Berry and Christian Martinez. Ramirez, thank you. Yep. And 1 goal in our first 4 games, including the first leg of the Herediano game, which we're down 1-0 to. And, they released that GAM sheet, and we have absolutely no GAM to even
I
bring
wrote that
players
as a
in.
note.
So,
I could not believe that. I was like, oh my God, man. It's just, when it's raining, it's pouring. Oh, my God.
The Galaxy are cooked right now, and it does not feel really good. I was reading a interesting point on one of the MLS articles that one of the writers wrote, that basically it felt like with the losses of Delgado and, the injuries to Ricky Puig, they were these these dominoes that, created a problem, and they just created problems as a result of that. It just feels like these small changes to the team have created such a expanding problem, and it feels very, when you watch the players on the pitch, you can just see the frustration between them.
Yeah.
And I'm not really loving it. Picks. Talk about St. Louis. Talk about Burki. Talk about the guy who didn't let us let this game be 3-1. I mean, I don't know. I didn't think we were going to win at any point.
Yeah.
It felt like so.
Definitely. I think that, I think you have to give Galaxy a little bit more credit in the St. Louis game. I think that there was a lot of chances that could have gone in had it not been for the post, and then obviously for Burki, the men that were, one of the men of the hour, because I'm going to be highlighting a couple of goalkeepers throughout the night. But I think, Burki has obviously been someone that has been so pivotal into St. Louis, but the fact that he's been showing it even again in this season, and, especially against Galaxy, who, I mean, at this point, Galaxy have become more known with their poor form than, being the MLS Cup champions, which is kind of a shame.
I know. I'm not even thinking about that now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like it's so far removed from each other. Because
spoken like someone that wins all the time, man. Oh my god, classic LA mentality.
Hey,
that's all I would be thinking about if we won an MLS Cup. I would be like, we can have 0 points next year. I don't care.
But yeah, that's exactly it. Where it's just like, Galaxy could have had a goal, and if they had gotten, those few, because I think that they were pretty dominant. Not dominant necessarily, but they had a lot of really good quality chances in the first 45.
Yeah.
And if they had made those goals in maybe 1 or 2, then I think that the game would have been a little bit different, and St. Louis would have had to react as opposed to, getting that early goal from a mistake and then just being able to capitalize even then. Because after that first goal went in and the mistake happened,
dude,
I feel like Galaxy just lost
sick.
their head. Yeah.
Not in a good way.
Yeah,
like sick.
No, the corner goal was
right before
that was
half too. Like, come on.
That's nightmare inducing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just unfortunate seeing that, because I think that Galaxy, if they had gotten a win, or if they had gotten a goal, or even if they had gotten, the first goal and then, conceded that mistake and it would have been 1-1, I don't think it would have been that much of an issue. I think that it would have been more so that they have a little bit more to propel themselves from, because they would have been doubling the goals that they've scored. But, I just think that there needs to be a little bit more on just like, I think Vanny has to just get the team together more cohesively, in the sense of just like, despite Puig, we can't even be thinking about Puig, because that's kind of the mentality that they're kind of relying on Puig to come back to come back for later in the season.
Someone needs to step up and be,
someone has to step up and be Puig. Yeah,
just for a little
exactly.
bit.
And there really is no midfielders that have stepped up. I feel like that is the giantest hole that like everyone is just like walking throughout the whenever I see Galaxy.
There's nothing there, man. It's like I said. I think I said this during the watch party, and it's not a good sign with how much MLS I've been able to watch over the last year, specifically now with these staggered times to start the year. I'm familiarizing myself with names that I wasn't familiar with on various rosters too. But I watch a lot of MLS over these last couple of years. The Galaxy have trotted out a couple names that I'm not familiar with in the midfield. That does not happen very often for me when I'm looking through things. They were starting a 17-year-old at right back. Things are just not. They're not good right now. And I was actually, if I can actually kind of go ahead with just a couple numbers really quick, because I think you guys will. This is pretty eye-opening. So I looked through, because I did the same thing for Philly, just to kind of illustrate some points on Kai Wagner, Baribo, and Sullivan, and seeing like where they're, just like various stats and analytics. And I did the same thing for the Galaxy, and my eyes, like, I had to have like taped my reaction, because I was literally could not believe like what it was for a sample size over the couple games of like what their top. We are. So we have three names that are the top performers, and the names are probably who you would expect them to be honest with you. But the top performer looks good on paper. It's 7.17 average rating. And that was Mickey Yamane, but that man played 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So that was the first game against San Diego. And he actually did have a pretty decent game, because he was getting involved with the overlap on Peck. And I felt like that was, out of that game, when we were watching picks, that was like really the only side that they were doing anything on.
They
and it was because
very heavily on
it.
He's
the second
really
half
complete,
he started
like, wing back. He's
good. I do like Mickey Yamane.
He came around in the second half of the season for us, like more offensively. At first, when he came in, he felt like more of a typical fullback, and then they kind of implemented more with the overlaps.
Yep. Which I think makes Peck that much more dangerous. And it's like,
sure,
if that not existing now too has essentially just like nullified Peck altogether, because teams have been able to really, they've been throwing so much more over that way just to like kind of compensate, where they don't have to worry about like trailing runners and him passing it off. He's had to carry and dribble. And that was so the next name is Gabriel Peck, and he's sitting on a 6.62 as that's the number 2. So right now, the top person that's played all 3 games for the Galaxies, the highest average rating that you have on the team is a 6.62 with Gabriel Peck. It just shows with the creation and what's going on. And if you look at his advanced analytics and what's going on offensively, he's actually still in like the 90th percentile for like shots and create. Like he's still Gabriel Peck. He's like still doing what he does, but it's just everything else around him is just not working. No one's can no one's not I think I made the point, like it feels like ankle weights on like the team during the watch party too, where it's just everything feels slow and like they can't get out of their own way. And then number 3 was Marco Royce on a 6.58. So it's just it just shows that like just nothing is working how it's supposed to. Obviously, I think this is really throwing up like it's a magnifying glass on a situation that, in all reality, probably mainly because it's a big market too. I think it's getting a magnifying glass because of like what the expectations were coming into the year off of a season that was so so incredible that honestly I don't even think too, like I think people expected them to be good, but I don't know if people expected those heights to be achieved like as quickly and as readily as it was. So I do think that a lot of this is maybe a little overblown in my opinion, with like the amount of injuries that you guys do have. I do think that you guys, like I said, I still had you guys like in a playoff spot. I think that's what realistically what your general manager, like when he thought not putting Ricky Puig on like a season ending IR at the beginning of the year, that was probably the thought process where it's like, well, if we just like make 7 or 8, like we can still win those playoffs. You get a best of 3 and it's like, then we'll just be on the road the rest of the season for the playoffs. It's like, we can do that. So it's when it comes to those types of situations with the MLS, it's a little unique, but it's like, it's who's ever playing the best at the end of the season when it comes down to it. So you just have to be good enough. You can't get this deep into a hole to start where it's like a couple more games all of a sudden, even when Paintsel comes back, and if it's still bad, then I would be like, you need to sound the alarm, like things are bad. But I mean, like we said, a couple points here over these next couple of games, or like even when Paintsel comes back, I still think it's salvageable. It's such a long season. And even with what you guys got going on, I mean, even just beating Herediano just to make sure you get to that next round, just to give you guys another crack at that with some players coming back. It's like there's a lot of different ways this season could be deemed a success, even if it's not on like the MLS Cup pathway, if that makes sense in my opinion. So it's like there's a couple different ways to get there. League's Cup's still another chance too, where it's like, if you guys completely missed out, you can still make Champions League through there. It's Open Cup, like, whoever happens to be in that. So there's always ways. That's what I think the beauty of MLS is, with how many that people complain about the fixture congestion, but like when you're bad, it also does kind of help bail you out in certain instances. Looking at you, Sporting Kansas City. So that would be what I would say. So for any Galaxy fans out there, in addition to Dill out there listening, I would say like don't panic as of yet. But yeah, it has not looked good to start. We can admit that it has not been good.
The other thing to be said, though, is, there is no other player besides maybe Ricky Puig that I would wait, this long for. And it shows a lot about, how much Ricky Puig means to LA Galaxy, how much, Benny has built around him, how much the team has built around him. But I think that, Puig is the player to wait for. And I think he might be one of the only MLS players that I can think of that, I would wait. And I have the trust that when he comes back that he would be able to get those points to, put you in the playoffs. But it just sucks getting rid of those, 2 midfielders that already knew the system pretty well. And then, having Puig be injured and not, having anyone who can really replace him in that system kind of just, leaves that gap in the midfield. But I do think that when Puig comes back and when Paintsel is back, like Biz is saying, that there is going to start to be strides. And I think that, there can be those early victories. I think that, 3 points against one of these teams and getting a couple more goals is going to elevate the team to be, a little bit more happy, a little bit more, finding how to play with each other and just, finding how to play without Puig. And I think that that's something that teams need to do, especially teams in the MLS. Like we're talking about with Vancouver, right? Like they're going to be missing 2-star players. They need to learn. And I think that MLS managers kind of need to adapt to learning how to play without those key stars and kind of learning how to play without just relying on their DPs. And I feel like a lot of teams don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
including the Red Bulls. So
true. Imagine this: it's the Western Conference Finals. Ricky Pooch scores a game winner curling to beat Minnesota United. He moonwalks on his reconstructed ACL. Life is good. Oh, all right. That section made me sad. So
I'm just happy you think we're making the Western Conference.
I had to throw it. You guys were giving me hope with this section, and I was just all sad. So we're gonna move away from this sad section. We're gonna talk about something nice really quickly here. Biz, say the name of the Seattle guy because you know how to say it correctly, and then I will do the rest of the part.
I did a warning in the pre-show meeting. Like, you guys might want to let me say that one because it's not how you think it is. But yeah, so I was watching the Seattle LAFC game, and they actually called up a player. Seattle's been very good about this, about developing through their youth academy. But a player by the name of Kalani Kasi Rienze was the name of the player. I'll let you take it away, Dylan. Just kind of giving the cliff notes on his performance, but was part of the Tacoma Defiance team that was just recently called up.
Yeah, I wonder why they're called the Defiance. But one of like 4 or 5 players that they called up in their kind of congested match schedule with CONCACAF Champions Cup, so it's kind of interesting. But played so well in the game against LAFC, scored his first goal, 30 of 31 passes completed, and a game-high 5 tackles. You know, we talked about Quinn Sullivan's high motor, exactly the type of role that Kalani brought to the team. And one thing that the coach was quoted with afterwards in the game is, you know, he said it was going to be an interesting ride home, talking about what we're going to do with Kalani. Are we going to give him a full contract? And, you know, just as of, I think, today or yesterday, that deal has been inked. Full-term deal for this season with a option for next season and the season after that. And I think one thing that was also interesting that he said is this is not just a contract because of one performance. We see his potential, and he's earned his way into this type of contract. And, you know, I really, really like a contract style like this. It's very American sports. Biz brought up a great point in terms of how much it reminds him of like the baseball AAA deals coming up for a little bit. I kind of compared it to 10-day contracts in the NBA, but it's a little less similar because in those, you can sign anyone to a 10-day contract. It's not just like their G League affiliates, which is their development league in the NBA. But you love to see it because, you know, the MLS is shuttling players from their team to their MLS. You know, whatever way. Shoveling them to you know, their MLS next team and then bringing them back up for certain games. I know there might be limits to how much they might be able to bring a player back and how many games they can play before they must give them a contract. But I love stuff like this. Pix, I know we talked a little bit about it in regards to just a smaller deal, but a 16-year-old player from the New York Red Bulls went over to AC Milan. And I know that's a little bit unrelated, but in terms of like youth players and MLS next players for your Red Bulls, have they been known to do much of that in the past few seasons? Have they taken advantage?
Yeah, so I think that one of the really key things, and I think that one of the really important things, is that the Red Bulls really like to utilize the youth system, obviously, and we really interchange with all the affiliates. And one of the players who've been playing on the Red Bulls too actually scored 2 match days ago.
Oh, nice.
But either way, I think that's the beauty of the game, is having those players come in through the academy and then give them the opportunities. Because obviously, I think that the issue that we have with the contracts and the temporary contracts is that in England and in Europe, you just call up your youth players and you usually don't even have to register them just because they are youth players. So I think that the barrier to entry is the contract situation, but I think the MLS has obviously found the solution. And I think that, you know, having those small utility players come in and be given a shot is exactly what we need in the league. And I think that especially when we have so many players being called out and when we're starting to, you know, deal with a lot of fixture congestion with, you know, players having teams and players having to play, you know, twice a week with, you know, Leagues Cup or, you know, CC with the Champions League and stuff like that, and then MLS and stuff like that, and even, you know, potentially playing for their national teams. So I think that having that extra opportunity to develop your youth players and give them MLS minutes is exactly what is needed, especially because we still don't really know what the level of MLS2 kind of is. Because we've only seen MLS2 play against each other. We don't really have, and they've probably played abroad too, but it's really good to be able to have them be on the first team and be able to compare them against, you know, some of your opposition. And that gives a little bit more insight. And I think that that's the beauty. That's one of my favorite parts of the game is seeing the youth rise up and be able to make a name for themselves.
I feel like that's the most inspiring thing as like a local fan that you can see.
Exactly.
One of you, it feels like, is represented out there. And Pix, while we're on your team, I think we should talk about them a little bit. They've done the whole spectrum of a result in 3 weeks, a win, a loss, and a draw, and an exciting fourth game against one of your favorite Colombians, Luis Muriel, next in Orlando City. But run us through kind of your thoughts so far. I know you have a few notes about it, and you're going to highlight the goalkeeper as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, your New York Red Bulls.
Yeah, so one of the things I also want to mention is just actually really excited because I'm going to be going to the Orlando game. And I'm going to be taking my nephews to their first game ever. So I'm going to try to get them, posted up with the Luis Muriel. Can I please have my shirt?
They definitely got to play the academy players now for your nephews.
Yeah, it's going to be in my closet, not theirs. But anyway, I think that the Red Bulls have been a lot more impressive than I thought. I think that if you gave me, the win, draw, and loss of those three teams, I think that that's kind of how I would have predicted it, with Cincy probably beating us, us taking points against Nashville, and then probably maybe a draw against Atlanta. But I think that the draw against Atlanta was really, something that surprised me a lot, because I think that Atlanta are such a big team in the East. And I think that the way that we shut down Lati Lath was really impressive, and the way that we also were shutting down a lot of options by Mier and Chuck, who's probably one of my favorite creative players in the league, especially in the Eastern Conference. I just think that, with those extra pieces that he's getting now, it makes the team so much more, so much scarier. But I think the Red Bulls really did a good job of containing it. And I think obviously Burki, is someone that, or not Burki, sorry, Coronel is someone that I should really highlight because of all the shots.
Your very own Burki is what you meant.
Exactly. Our Burki.
Our Burki.
In Coronel. But yeah, I think that Coronel, throughout the MLS is also a player that's been kind of very underrated in a sense. He's even been underrated by his countrymen because he holds dual citizenship. So he was, I'm pretty sure, born in Brazil, but his mom is Paraguayan. So he was able to represent Paraguay, but he hasn't been able to do too much. He was called up for Copa America, but didn't get an appearance. He was just on the bench. Even being benched by someone who's 36, who's still playing in Paraguay. So I think that there's still a huge amount of bias for, people playing in South America, even if I think that I personally think that the MLS league is probably, has surpassed the Paraguayan league. So I think that it's kind of complex when it comes to even though the reality and the bias of, the call ups and, the fans of South America, it kind of calls into question about, especially with how many goalkeepers we have that represent, Peru, we have the representative of Jamaica, we have the representative of Canada, representative of, Paraguay. I think the MLS is one of the leagues that really focuses on getting, American as a continent goalkeepers.
That is an interesting note that you make. A lot of the CONCACAF nations, all of their goalkeepers are in the MLS. All three of Canada's most likely call-ups are going to be from the MLS, which is
exactly.
That's really funny.
And that's actually someone who I wanted to bring up because I think Coronel kind of would love to kind of be in the same position as St. Clair, which is Minnesota boy.
That's nice.
Because Coronel has been struggling to get that starting position, whereas St. Clair has started to get more and more of those call-ups over.
He's projected number one right now.
It's I see in your note, he was benched. So the Paraguayan keeper was your guy has been benched by a 36-year-old who's playing above him. That's very reminiscent of the St. Clair situation before he got it. I know Crepeau got it for a moment, but the old Canadian keeper was that old dude that was playing in Serbia.
Borjan?
Yeah, he was disrespectful just to call him the old dude, but he was a really good keeper. But he was old, and
Milan Borjan. We'll identify him for.
But I think that
Streets won't forget.
I knew that.
That's exactly the situation that Coronel finds himself in.
Yeah, they'll forget. Streets forgot.
Where it's just he has to kind of put in those better performances so that he can. The issue is that even if he does put in those performances, is he going to get called up or get that first spot because the manager might not respect the MLS in that sense. Where Canada has kind of a different situation, but I think that Coronel can see himself a lot in St. Clair. And I think that St. Clair is also, a goalkeeper who I would also agree is super underrated. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about, Biz, what you thought a little bit about St. Clair.
Yeah, just for this year or just.
I think
Like
overall, but also in Canada.
Yeah, so Dayne's been kind of an interesting person to follow. And it's been, I should specify for MLS standards, I don't think that we could have much of a better option, to be honest with you. I think when Dayne is on, Dayne is like MVP for goalie standards, like goalkeeper of the year level talent when he is on. I think the issue is like a lot of goalkeepers, I think he's super streaky and he gets in these modes. The other thing with Dayne is it's very, we'll put it this way, it's very MLS level distribution as well. That's always been something that I think has plagued him. And I think in today's day and age, that's a big time hindrance on your game and your ability to be called into international situations. I feel like for most teams, I do think with Canada, you get a little bit more leeway, especially too, if you start to play maybe a little bit tighter to the back and you're playing just a little bit simpler out of the back too, where you're starting, a lot of teams now are, playing so short out of the back where there's not even a lot of teams aren't even utilizing goal kicks and playing it long. They're just straight into the feet of players and, even pulling a center back into the box to just take the ball from there. So that's a little bit different. I do think that helps kind of walk some of these keepers through it a little bit. But I will say, there's a clear there's evidence there that he's tried to improve that. I think anybody that struggles with, you can even use Matt Turner as an example too, that I think, that I think has clearly tried to take steps. You can argue how many steps he's taken, but I definitely see kind of a similar thing with Dayne with distribution being, and I would say they actually are kind of like similar players too, which is kind of a good comp because I think Dayne's thing that has always gotten him maybe even like slight European interest has been his shot stopping numbers when he's on, or it's next level, like 99th percentile MLS. Like it was in the range of like his year that he did win goalkeeper of the year. I actually think Turner was in the league that year, and Turner was better than him and like off the charts, but it wasn't like anything that was like so staggering. Like it was good, and Dayne was in that ballpark too. It was like Turner was European level, but Dayne was kind of like knocking on the door too. Kind of the same thing with like Petrovic as well. So both those guys have profiled where maybe not the best on distribution side, but they're just true out and out goalkeepers. And I think Dayne kind of speaks to the same thing, and how that's translated now with us, where I think we've had kind of years where there's been 2022, it was good year, 2023 down year, 2024, like kind of a little bit of both, where it's tough when the biggest thing with him is he's seeing games consistently, and there hasn't been any, outside of any injuries, there hasn't been any reason for him to be replaced. At the early portions of his career, he was going back and forth with Tyler Miller, kind of like jostling for the job, because Dayne was a draft pick for us out of Maryland. So you're dealing with kind of like proving that you belong and like developing your play over time. And now it's transitioned into him getting calls into the Canadian national team and trying to deal with like kind of weaving through he was the 3 at one point. And now it's like you're starting to get looks because he went on that insane run in 2022 where it's like, well, maybe we should give this guy looks. And it's been interesting to see. I would say I definitely have not watched him play for Canada much. It's probably only been like 1 or 2 games. He's played more than that, but that's probably as much
like
as
around
I've
8 or 9.
Yeah. So it hasn't been anything too crazy. A lot of them have been friendlies. And I'll usually just kind of like take a peek and see how he did in the score lines. But yeah, nothing that like sticks out staggering where it's like, let in 5 one game or anything. It's the teams I think that they were supposed to lose to, they lost to. It's like kind of one of those situations. But I definitely think that he has the chops to be the Canada number 1 going forward. I think he's a unique talent too, with being a left-footed keeper. I think that's really unique, and that a lot of teams do value that, because I think that can really mess with a lot of teams, even just with like how they press and like all these different things. So it obviously helps like a different side of your back line too, in comparison to having a right-footed keeper. So just even with them being able to pass it back and where they're playing the ball, all these different situations. So so there's a lot of things about Dayne's game that I do like. I still am in the camp too that I think he would thrive in a league over in Europe if he chose to ever make the jump. I don't know if that's something he wants to do. I'm sure, at his age, he's still kind of in his mid-20s. I think that's something that a player like that would,
especially as a goalkeeper.
Would take the opportunity to do it.
Married and has a kid. I think
that's right.
Yeah. Before he gets too settled in.
Gets comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't want to sit on the laurels, but Dayne has definitely been one of my favorite loons to follow for a long time. The last thing I'll say about him, that's kind of the funny portion of it, was I think World Soccer might know Dayne because he went viral on the YouTube shorts, the TikToks a few years back in Leagues Cup because he had the exchange with Xherdan Shaqiri where he told him he has no balls and in a penalty, and then Shaqiri just like splashed one in like top bins aggressively. It's like, so Dayne sitting there like you see him mouth and you have no balls, and then Shaqiri just like destroys the back of the net. Like it's just him sitting there like in response, like nodding like aggressively, like
I respect that though. If he tells enough people they have no balls, eventually it will work. So.
Well, and who knows if it plays it out the right way too, and you end up making the save, you look like an absolute legend because you just did it to Shaqiri. So it's like, I get it.
Ball,
but,
so.
Yeah, but if you fail, it looks like one of the funniest TikToks in quite some time. So yeah.
All right, picks. We got one more keeper before we move into our grab bag, and we're going south, really south, outside of the MLS to a guy you've told me to sign in Football Manager. You're really high on him. You've said it. And I like.
Can I interject too really quick,
Oh,
Bill?
yes.
Right before we go into the grab bag too, I do have one more team that I just want to discuss because we would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about Wilfried Zaha's debut for sure. So yeah, Pixel, take it away. But I just want to make sure before we transition away.
Yeah, for sure. If you're a friend of mine, a friend of Biz, a friend of Dill, you have heard this name. I champion it everywhere I go.
He's your Diego Luna, I think.
I think he might be.
I think he is.
I think so. So a little bit of background on him. It's Kevin Mier. He's an academy prospect from my favorite club, Atlético Nacional. Now playing at Cruz Azul. Had some interest in, got some interest by Spurs a little bit when he was in Colombia. Had some interest from Bayern when he was at Cruz Azul. He's been one of the, really big prospects coming out of Liga MX and one of the goalkeepers who have been really impressive. But one of the things that really defines Kevin Mier is the fact that he is a sweeper keeper to a T. I think that, René Higuita is one of the revolutionaries of the role. I think Neuer completely revolutionized it as well. But you could really tell Higuita, which is the guy who did the scorpion kick, you could really tell that this guy is his goalkeeping coach and that he has left his stamp on him. With how much he comes out with the ball, how much he dribbles with the ball. And they're actually playing right now while we're recording. They're playing it's Seattle versus Cruz Azul.
Yeah, that game has kind of gone off the rails too. It's 2-1 now. Seattle had an away goal.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, Cruz Azul's up now, so now they're going to need another one.
So the big thing is that was one of the big question marks that I had coming into tonight was Kevin Mier is that sweeper keeper where it's, if he does come off his line and concedes a goal, then they, suddenly Seattle have that away goal. So it's going to be interesting for me to watch back and see how adaptable is he. And the other big thing is that what happens a lot with a lot of Colombians within the Liga MX is that a lot of them just get so high salaries that they don't even move to Europe because they're already getting called up to the men's national team from Mexico and they're already earning huge salaries. So Kevin Mier might be a player that you are constantly seeing, potentially through Leagues Cup, through Champions League games. So that's a player that I really wanted to highlight just because I think that he is potentially, and I think I'm a little bit early in saying that I would like him to be Colombia's #1 keeper now, but I do think that after the World Cup, he's definitely going to be the Colombia keeper after the World Cup, after Vargas starts to, settle down a little bit, who's another player who's been in the Liga MX a while. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see his development overall. And I think that he's going to be a huge thorn in the sides of a lot of MLS teams, especially because Cruz Azul is a team that's always, one of the bigger teams in Liga MX. And it's going to be interesting to see if he stays there. But the question mark is always going to be if he leaves. He's still super young and he still has so much potential. So I just wanted to give a little bit of love to the keepers. I think that, they don't get too much love.
I like that.
So yeah.
All right. So Kevin Mier, the Diego Luna of Dayne St. Clair's. Finally, Wilfried Zaha's debut. Biz had to say it. And I appreciate that. So, what do we got?
I had to do it. I was looking through, just kind of doing the once over, just making sure. And when I saw Charlotte's name, I'm like, we can't go without talking about Zaha. It has to be done. So, yeah. So for those that don't know, Wilfried Zaha has officially been signed over this past transfer window. Well, technically it's still going, but the most current transfer window for Charlotte FC. So their big player, Charlotte's been swinging for big players here, I feel like, and been unsuccessful over the last couple years. They've brought in a couple decent notable names, but I feel like they've really wanted that one name that is the guy that is going to be kind of a stamp of Charlotte's here. We're not messing around. We want to be known as like a thing in the MLS. And I always call them like kind of being like, like the Atlanta little bro from the model of like what they're doing, because they're always, I feel like they have the money to be able to do it, but I feel like the execution just hasn't been carried out the same way out of the gate yet. Obviously there's still time. I think teams get compared with being expansion sides too. I think you can look at, like Cincinnati gets compared a lot to just being down the road from Columbus and what things look like. In Cincinnati, obviously Columbus wasn't even remotely close to the expansion time frame of when they came in, but I think you get compared to who you're kind of around as well. And Cincy, it took them a little bit of time to get things sorted out, and they really struggled out of the gate. I mean, they're widely considered to be one of the worst expansion sides out of the first couple of years.
Oh, wow.
I mean, just disaster, tons of manager turnover, broke every defensive record negatively that you could really break. It just was not good soccer. And there was a lot of promises made out of the gate that there was going to be success out of the gate. And they've turned it around. And now I would say that they are probably one of the teams that a lot of people would like to see their team look like, which is, so it just takes time. And I don't think Charlotte's been that bad, but there has been some things that have been a little head scratching with how they've gone about just like with roster builds from the get-go, how they've handled management. They had their first manager ever, if I remember right, was only in charge for like 12 games or something like that. Like, and it was like just a butting of heads between him and upper management and all these different things. So it's been a little up in the air on what the Charlotte identity I think has looked like. And now I feel like bringing in like a Wilfried Zaha, that's changed, where I feel like now all of a sudden when I watch Charlotte, I'm like, okay, I understand what we're going for here. I understand like what the blueprint to success is. They have a fun American international, Patrick Ajiman, that's been brought in obviously now and is starting to get national team love. You have old players in the central midfield like that are European known entities like Ashley Westwood that captains the team. You have on a backline Addison Malanda, who's a really exciting center back that's a French prospect that I think a lot of people were surprised they were able to get. Tim Ream, who's a national team product, is back there now too. So you have players that people are familiar with that I think people can identify with now and actually like watch and be like, okay, these couple players on the field are going to drive and what they're going to like drive the play forward and understand what they're going to do for each other. So what Zaha does, I feel like when you plug him into this now is just a genuine out and out playmaker where he demands the ball now. And it's clear when you're watching them. And it's actually too, I just mentioned that you made the point, Dill, that Ream has been playing on the left, which it gives me flashbacks to like when Tim Ream was viewed as being really bad and not part of the American national team, because he was always playing as an outside back for a long time. And I feel like him playing in a lot of these like, ball at his feet, playing in like these three center back systems, maybe playing two in the back, but maybe playing a little bit more ball progression where he's actually looking to ping passes and stuff like that really ended up being the identifiable thing for him going forward. And so that's why I was a little like, I was scratching my head watching him on the left too, saying like, well, why would they do that? That doesn't really suit him anymore, because the thing that you're going to want now too with Zaha coming into the team is you're going to want somebody that's overlapping and creating kind of similar to what we identified with Peck and Yamane, where you have somebody that's taking some eyes off Zaha and allowing him to, cut inside and, take those lanes that he wants to take with the ball and find those ways. So them bringing in a player from the Belgian league on loan at left back makes a ton of sense. Somebody that profiles as being much, much quicker. And you can tell like Ream's definitely a smart guy, so he knows when to do it, when to not, but it's definitely it's a slog for that guy at his age to constantly overlap on an American football field now, getting all the way up and down and expecting him to do that for a full season. So I definitely see the vision as to why they did it, but results. And I'm curious to see, I'll touch on it too, if you guys have anything to say about Zaha and just what it looked like, or even just your thoughts on him being in the league. But so the results that we pulled over the last 2 weeks for them was Zaha debuted, beat Atlanta United. I think it ended up being 2-0. It was either 2-0 or 2-1.
And he was in on both those goals.
He was goal and an assist. The goal was like definitely, it was weird, and it definitely backtracked me on everything nice I said about Brad Guzan for the Miami series, because it just Brad Guzan, I think for Atlanta, that you'll definitely see them do something at goalkeeper finally. I think we've hit the point where it's it's that time for Guzan where he looks his age now.
He used all his powers against
he did, yeah. He made a deal with the devil.
Jesus.
Yeah, he made a deal with the devil, and it's been worn out now over that playoff series. Like he's like, just let me look good in front of Messi, man. But so that was a really good result because I do think that Atlanta United team, being as high octane as they are, holding them to a 2-0 and getting 3 points out of that was great. But then they just played Inter Miami now on the road and actually lost to a 10-man Inter Miami with Messi playing for a portion of the game. But ended up getting, I think it was a red card about pretty close to halftime, and we're playing and Inter Miami, not to mention one of the prettier goals over the 2 weeks since we've been recording, but Allende and Suarez combined for this like sick kickoff goal off this like little back heel combo give and go that was really nasty. If you're watching right now, you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely go look it up. It's pretty nasty, but there was no reason that they shouldn't pull points out of that game after Miami went down. Man, Miami just, if there's one thing too that they still lack, it's the defensive integrity and that stability. So it's when they're going down to 10 men, like that's something you have to take advantage of. So I think they'll be disappointed from that. I think you could see Zaha frustrated in that one because I watched a lot of that game. But I'll kick it to you guys before we move on to kind of the grab bag stuff. What do you guys think of, if you watch the games, what were your thoughts? And if not, what do you think of Zaha coming to the league? Because I'm so excited he's here. It's so fun.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue with Charlotte over the years is that they haven't had, the big star like Zaha that fills out. They have. I think Charlotte probably has one of the biggest stadiums for the MLS, right?
They do. Yeah, it's an NFL. They play where the Carolina Panthers play because it's the same owner. So yep.
So the biggest thing is like you haven't had a star to fill out that huge arena, like an arena where you get nosebleed. Like you will like one of like the weird from the pictures I've seen of the stadium, like being up there is like crazy. You're like however many feet up. It feels like you're about to fall with how many seats that they have and how many, but they haven't really had a reason besides just, we have a local soccer team. And, Charlotte have made really good moves and not overspending and not making huge moves that might be a little bit, too soon and stuff like that. They've been very smart in their spending, but I think that Zaha is exactly what they need to fill out those stadiums and get people to drive and have someone like, Red Bulls, we had Henri to have, lead the line. And kind of market the Red Bulls in a sense and kind of change us from the Metro Stars to the Red Bulls a little bit after the acquisition. And I think that Zaha needs that. And I think some expansion teams kind of need that too. Just so that they have more, attention on the team. I think that most soccer fans know the name Zaha from his time at, the Premier League and, the beautiful goals that he was creating and like the skills and all that stuff. So I think that having that star there in such a big stadium is going to be really nice. But the flip side of that, it's going to be really interesting to see Zaha playing in in the summer of just like that, all the heat of Charlotte at the age of 32 and having to be the guy who's receiving all the balls,
the dog days of summer in Charlotte,
pulling all the strings. I think it's going to be very challenging for Zaha, especially as a player who we've seen how much demand he has, how much he calls for the ball. He kind of demands the ball in a good way, because that's kind of what you need from a team. You need that central piece that Puig was doing, that Forsberg does for us. So I think it's an excellent purchase, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how Zaha goes moving forward, and if he's able to give them potentially 2 years. So I'm really excited to see the rest of his season.
Yeah, I've liked him in his first 2 games. Definitely very impactful. Started slow in his debut game against Atlanta.
I agree.
Nothing much in that first half. In the second half, he looked like a completely different guy and was really good against Miami as well. Took on his man a lot. He created 2 really good chances. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get past, a 10-man Miami who, lost a guy in like the 38th minute. It was in the first half. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, I think Pix makes some really good points about what he brings to a team like Charlotte, especially when they're trying to replicate, that Cincy style, that Atlanta style of building a team. And I think Zaha is a guy who is open. I think he's kind of a perfect fit where, he's 32. He's not at the end of his career just yet. This could be still some really good years. And he's been open to playing in different leagues. He came from Turkey after Crystal Palace, and he was good in Turkey as well. So I'm excited to see more, see how he connects with the rest of the roster. Obviously, Ajame, slow start despite getting into the U.S. men's national team. But
Mm.
I'm excited to see how it goes. But that is it for our MLS recap of week 2 and 3. But before we go, we are going to grab bag a few extra topics before we talk about the predictions for the upcoming watch party on March 23rd.
It's the grab. Let me reach into that bag.
All right, everybody. I felt a little inspired by picks going down south, so I'm going to take the plane east and visit a man that we love and we miss already, despite him only being gone for now 4 games in Europe, and that is Cucho Hernandez, the first ever player from the new segment for me, MLS Abroad. It's definitely something that I really like. I mentioned in the first episode some of the transfer trends of the MLS, ingoing and outgoing. I think in terms of football, it's my favorite thing about the sport is the squad building, and just because it's such a world game where people go, why they go, where they do, where they come from originally, and everything has to do with that. The type of people that they are, the style of play, the nationality, how they, where they played and grew up. I think it's all very interesting. And Cucho is pretty interesting, and he's making his return to Europe, and not only Europe, but to Spain as well. Yeah. So he has started 4 games for Real Betis. I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find it. It's still undisclosed fee for how much he went over there for, from what I saw, but I was kind of looking at some old sources. But 4 starts so far. No goal contributions, but Real Betis have won all 4 games. He's put 7 shots, only 2 on target for 0.88 XG. But I have watched a few of the games. I watched the last game that he was in, almost all of it, in their 1-0 win. But the thing I can say about Cucho is he's definitely, given the keys to the car in terms of that 9 spot. I think where he really has been thriving for them is he's dribbling well and he keeps possession really well. He's a part of the buildup. He likes to spray it out to either wing. They have Anthony, the GOAT, one of Pix's favorites. His passing, though, despite keeping that possession, has been average in terms of the percentiles, but he is a part of the team, like I said, that is on a 4-game win streak and has Betis in 6th place. So I think they're holding on to one of, I think the last or the second to last European spot for La Liga. So it's a very exciting team. I mean, this is a team that's just full of so many names. They got Bellerin, who's injured. I really like him. Isco. They got Johnny Cardosa. They have, who else am I? Anthony. Like I said, they got Llorente, I'm pretty sure, the center back. They've got a lot of really cool players, and I think Real Betis is just one of those teams that, I've kind of latched on to as a European team that I just like to watch. I don't watch a ton of La Liga. I think the most La Liga I watch is just Rafinha highlights because he's just so awesome. But yeah, I'm really, really hoping Cucho has a good season, second half of the season, and continues to have a good career in Spain. He was I would say, in the Premier League for Watford, he was underwhelming, but how many goals you're really going to expect for a recently promoted team fighting for, to stay in the league? It's always a toss-up with how many goals you can actually give a guy like that in a new league. But Pix, I'll go to you. He's he's a Colombian, so be biased. Tell me, what is your early review of Cucho at Betis, if you have been able to kind of keep track?
Yeah, I've been watching a few games. I think one of the big things is that he has only had 4 games. I don't know how many minutes those have been. I don't think that they've been 90 minutes every time.
No, I think he's come off in all 4.
He's come off. Yeah, so I think that one of the other issues is that he wasn't registered for the Conference League, so it's taking him a little bit of time to get used to the squad. I think that, a lot of MLS players have said, but obviously Cucho's a different case because he's returning, but a lot of MLS players have said that it's kind of difficult to adapt to playing in another league. Cucho's a little bit different because he's already played in La Liga through Getafe. But it's going to be, I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to, but I really do like the fact that he is given a lot of liberty. And I think the more and more he meshes with all the pieces in the squad, I think the more he's going to get involved. But one of the things that he's missing are those, Europa Conference games that don't have as much consequences as maybe the La Liga games.
I feel like that's almost like the perfect level for him to get acclimated.
Exactly. So the biggest shame is that, the MLS the transfer window is different, where like if we had been in line, then they would have been able to register Champions League completely, as opposed to just register, the 2 or 3 that they can. And then it was even more complicated because of the sale of Victor Reis, I think, to Palmeiras.
Yep.
Or no, sorry, it was Victor Roque to Palmeiras. So obviously that made it more complicated, but I think that Cucho is a player who actually I really wanted to, have one of the starting spots for the Copa America.
Yeah.
But through some other extenuating circumstances, he wasn't able to. But overall, I think that if he does,
I mean, we're laughing about it. You got to talk about
yeah.
it.
So
He's a gooner. He's a gooner.
yeah,
And
we're
not
surprised
Arsenal.
he didn't join Arsenal.
Exactly.
Because Cucho had been called up. I think this was maybe friendlies or maybe qualifiers before the Copa America and before we had finalized the Copa America squad. And Cucho was called up for his MLS performances. But I think in an away day, he was sending inappropriate videos, sharing inappropriate videos to some of his friends and some of his teammates in the group chat or something. And then there was something with some blackmail going on or something. So the Colombian head coach was just like, we'll have none of this. And, we're not relying on him.
He said Cucho had big balls, but in a bad way.
Yeah. This is going to be the YouTube show, right?
Cucho's big balls. Don't allow him to be the starting 9 for Colombia.
But yeah, I think overall, maybe if he does show a little bit more at this Betis side that is, fighting for those European places, maybe he might get a called up despite, his vices. So, we can only hope that he gets better.
The vice captain. All right. I think I'm going to continue this segment. It's one of my favorite. I just keep track of this stuff, anyways, because I really like seeing how, it's important for the
He's got a whiteboard at home.
Exactly. All the players connect.
Yeah. Giant globe. He's got little thumbtacks on.
I have a pixelated photo of Cucho's phone on one,
The WhatsApp messages.
Exactly.
Blurred out.
What did it really say?
It's like the Charlie Day meme
exactly
with all the yarn.
Was he sending them to Carlos Gomez, another MLS player? That's
corrupting the youth.
Exactly. He's corrupting the MLS
John
Colombians
Duran.
abroad. Exactly.
Next episode on SAS.
All right. Let's bring it back to the United States. And Biz has another controversial topic.
Yeah, not as controversial as like porn. But we'll reel it back in a little bit.
I think this is worse.
Sorry to disappoint everybody.
Price gouging is worse.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh goodness, but yes, let's talk about the Messi ticket pricing that has honestly kind of gone viral over the last probably the last week. Again, it's kind of resurfaced. I feel like it resurfaces every time a team does a wacky, goofy way of dealing with it, because every team has the autonomy to handle it how they want to. I'll preface this by saying that I'm actually really happy with how my own personal club has handled this year. We have Inter Miami on the schedule this year for the first time at home ever. We've never, being in the West, it's kind of a lottery on what teams you're playing every single season, because the schedule, is fixed on your own personal conference and ensuring that you play all those teams. And then the numbers don't work out with being able to play the entire Eastern Conference side too. There's 30 teams for anybody that is not aware of how many teams have now developed into the MLS, and probably more on the way. So it's very Americanized with how many franchises that we have. But with that, every team has the ability to play. I think it's 6 total crossovers from each conference. So we've played Inter Miami a couple times in our history, but I think it's twice, and both times we've happened to play there. So me and my brother have had our fingers crossed here with this little messy window that we have, that Inter Miami would get drawn, and we would happen to have them at home. And just so happens this year that we do, I believe, sometime in May. So we're really excited about that, and what that's really meant to anybody that is a season ticket holder, or anybody that has the ability to go to these games. It's meant the fervor for these tickets, and what has been created from the buzz of him still coming over here. I think a lot of people, I've heard just kind of through the grapevine with some of the discussions I've had in my own Discord with it, of the Messi fervor was a big thing. Even over in Europe, it was kind of crazy that he came over here to MLS and decided that this was the pathway he wanted to take. Obviously similar to Ronaldo choosing the Saudi league at a certain point. It kind of had the same level of the ripples just kind of throughout football of those. I mean, those are the two most widely popular players that still exist to this day. They're both the two that are constantly debated about the greatest of all time. So it's understandable that that's how it is. But let me preface this and kind of give you guys the cliff notes of what Houston did, and then I'm going to get your own takes on what do you think is the solution in your ideal world of how teams should handle this, and then we'll talk about like just some of the fallout of why this is and kind of give the context of why this is happening with how this Messi stuff is going on. So here's what happened with the Houston Dynamo, and I will say this. So Houston had a game against Inter Miami just within the league and had Miami come to town. Now, Miami has not disclosed what they're doing with Messi with them playing in Champions League at this point of the season. So it's always kind of a ambiguous up in the air situation on what is actually happening with Messi from a game to game basis. Is he sitting? Is he not even making the trip? Is he going to sub on? Like, it's really anybody's guess at this point. And with a player of this magnitude, I think that's where a lot of the frustration stems. But here's what Houston wrote, because Messi didn't even end up making the trip to Houston and people had already purchased tickets. So the Houston Dynamo The Houston Dynamo are excited to host Inter Miami at Shell Energy Stadium on Sunday evening. The recently shared player status report for the match did not include forward Lionel Messi, but it has been reported he did not make the trip to Houston. Unfortunately, we have no control of who plays for our opponent. We look forward to hosting everyone tomorrow for what would be an incredible atmosphere and celebration of soccer for the city of Houston. To show our appreciation, fans who attend tomorrow night's match can claim a complimentary ticket to a future Dynamo match this season. Additional details will be provided early next week. So, having said that, with how that was set out, obviously that got a lot of negative feedback from not only Houston season ticket holders, but I've seen so many different YouTube shorts sharing that thing with the disdain for that, and a lot of discourse. So, what I would say, and here's kind of the question and how I'll phrase it to you guys. So I've seen a lot of discourse online and through my own personal Discord. We've had some of the discussions on this sentiment specifically. This would never happen in Europe. How do you two both respond to the fact that Europeans struggle to fathom the ticket pricing and then the response from teams here locally on how they are handling the Messi, like, coming to town situation currently? And how does that differ? I'll provide some of the missing context if we don't cover it, just to make sure we're kind of covering our bases here. But Dill, what do you think is the difference between this Messi situation here with how the MLS is handling this versus like what we're seeing in Europe?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you don't have the same type of opportunity to see a generational player like Messi that you do in the U.S. just simply because of travel. Like, it's so hard to get from place to place in the U.S. for cheap. And even if you do it, quote unquote, in a cheap way, there's still so many things that you have to do. You most likely are going to have to get on a plane or do a long car ride. You're going to have to find a place to stay unless you're coming back the same day. And then you're just getting gouged with the prices as well. It's like in Europe, you know, if Messi's playing, you get a ton of opportunities to see a guy like that in European competition. Even if you're in another country, the travel isn't as extreme as it is here in the U.S. And them giving him a complimentary ticket, I was going to make a joke. I mean, dude, if he doesn't play, just give him a Messi bobblehead. But they literally did something like that. They try to give him something free, but it's not what they actually want.
I know it. I know it.
I hate that. I know it. That's like when you're working like your 9 to 5 and you're just working your ass off, and instead of getting a bonus, you get a pizza party or something.
Oh yeah.
But like at the end of the day, I think so much of these problems with the U.S. compared to Europe is just it's distance and travel. It's just so difficult for U.S. fans to have the same opportunities. And like you said, each team is going to deal with the situation differently. So there's going to be some heroes and some villains in how they handle this. But that seems to be like the main thing. Pix, what about you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is as soon as Biz was writing the question, I wrote down travel, because it's like a lot of people don't fathom the size of the United States. We've talked about it a little bit, but like Biz has to travel like 8 hours to get to any other, to maybe see any other MLS teams.
Chicago would be a little closer, but it's like we never play them. So
I'm spoiled here. I'm like the California teams are the spoiled ones, especially San Diego.
Same here. I'm super spoiled.
You both are. New York and you guys are the ones that actually have teams. Yeah.
But I think the converse of that is that, I've never seen Messi at a Red Bulls game or anything like that, because there's like the resale prices are insane as a result of like, because I live right outside New York and you live right by LA. Like the biggest thing is that you have a lot of people who even travel like by plane, even from outside the country, to go see these games potentially. So you have a lot of like casual fans coming in, And one of the issue with that is that it kind of, ostracizes a lot of the actual fans. So one of the things that the Red Bulls have done that a lot of other teams have done is that they make it so that that match you can't buy tickets for. You can only get it through season ticket holders get those tickets, and then they do the resale afterwards.
Mhm.
And then obviously the season ticket holders can resell it too, and that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest issue is having so many, of those casual fans who are often, dressed in Messi and Miami jerseys. And I think that is such a bad look for the league in a sense, where it's just like, I don't know, the more that the leagues can kind of protect the fans of their organization, the better. But so many of, our owners just prioritize the money instead of the fan bases.
Yep.
And,
I mean,
my organization is one of them.
I'll play devil's advocate though, because as a Tottenham fan, I feel like there's a similar thing with Tottenham as a team. They're a big touristy team, especially with the huge South Korean audience that they have with Heung-min Son, and there's definitely a discourse about Tottenham ticket prices and people traveling to see Son, and that displacing like the local fans. So I don't want to, at the end of the day, more likely than not, a lot of these, like, I wouldn't say fair weather fans, but like fans of the moment are coming in to see, Messi. It's just very obvious. But if we can convert some of them into true MLS fans, that really is the goal. I think we just need to set up that system a little bit better, because at the end of the day, like this type of situation with the ticketing and the availability of the tickets, unless you do something really extreme, like with season ticket holders, like it's unavoidable with a player like Messi. Like this is once in a lifetime opportunity for some people to see their favorite player. And this is a lot of people's favorite player. This isn't just like, it's different. It's just very, very different and very unique. And, there's a lot of polarizing opinions on it. Like there's a lot of people saying that once Messi leaves, the MLS is just going to, go downhill again. And, like kind of like post Beckham and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like I like the way Red Bulls kind of handles it, but you're never going to stop the resale. Like resale is such a huge market, like a huge business here in the United States. So
I think resale goes hand in hand with American sports, and that's just an unfortunate truth.
No one, unless you're like a season ticket holder, really buys from like directly from the team. I feel like
correct.
Like, it's all StubHub. Like they have a monopoly on ticket. Resale. Like, it's so
SeatGeek is our official one.
It's
I think
insane, dude. Like I can't remember the last time I've bought from any ticket from.
Yeah, it's baseball's really the only place that you would do it nowadays, and that's just because they're not selling out regularly. And so I'll touch on a couple of things because we actually had a really good discussion in my Discord about this, and this is actually what like inspired me to talk about this. So I'm glad that you guys touched on a couple of the points, but there was a few more that I wanted to just highlight and illustrate for people that might not be aware that this is a thing over here, because it really is. And I have some personal anecdotes too of like how me and my brother are planning on dealing with this, because Minnesota United's being really great about it. We're keeping, some teams are moving this because it is such a big game where they're trying to, really emphasize that they need to get more people in there because they feel like there's the demand there and they need to make the money. And so we're keeping it at Allianz Field. They're allowing us to just buy face value tickets. I've seen teams that have even upped the value in the ticket to like try to kind of like just trying to de-incentivize people from reselling it and stuff like that to a degree. And so there's a lot of different ways the teams have done it. I think Minnesota United's done it the right way. I'm really happy that they are. But I'll touch on a couple different things. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure to illustrate too, because the one video that really stuck out to me was the fact that kind of poking fun, saying that this would never happen in Europe. And I agree. I don't think something to this magnitude for like, if you're talking a big 4 league, big 5 league, I don't really think it would happen in Europe. But the difference with that is that I think there's a cultural difference there of that. There's such a grassroots like level of just, I think, enjoying the game and it being your top sport and part of your culture, versus here where, I mean, soccer is, I mean, you can make the argument maybe 4th in the pecking order right now here in this country. So you have that playing against it as one of the different things. I think on top of it too, you have kind of what you said, Dill. So you kind of touched on the point that I wanted to mention, but I think the people that really are driving the ticket values up as much as they are, I don't think it's necessarily, anybody outside of Central American and South American interest is driving these ticket prices. It's people that are living here that have never had an opportunity to ever see this man play. Yep. That he's a mythical creature to them. Like, it's like, this guy is not of this earth. It's a completely different thing where never in their lives, some of these people maybe were never able to afford a trip to go see like top end players go play in Europe. And they're living here and he's coming into their backyard. And now there's an opportunity for them to get here. And they have the ability to be able to save as much money as they possibly can to be able to try to afford some of these insane resale values. My brother and I wanted to make sure that I shared this anecdote, but my brother works kind of hand in hand with at his place. He has a warehouse in the back, and he works with a couple Mexican Americans, and they've really taken an interest to the Loons as of late. So he's always just kind of bullshitting with them whenever he goes back talking about the team. And the couple guys back there, he's friendly with one specifically that like his kids play where we used to go to high school even. So like they just kind of hit it off. And so he always asks him about the Loons because he knows he has season tickets. And so my brother brought up when he first heard about it, about Messi being there. And he said, I don't care what it costs. We will be there. Like, and that's really the mantra with a lot of people that have not had an opportunity ever to see this guy. It's a completely different animal. And I think you could maybe make the argument with a couple other players on this planet right now where it'd be maybe something a little bit similar. I mean, Zlatan drove ticket prices up to a certain level when he was here. It's like you're always going to have that, but it's not to the level we're dealing. I shared a picture of what my ticket price is right now. I would say on resale on a good night, on a summer night, my face value tickets I think are in like the 40s. On a good night, I could probably resell it for like $100 on a really good, like on an ideal, like perfect night during the summer. We can probably flip them for a little over double sometimes. And we're going pretty frequently, so we don't do it very often. It's just when we have something come up. But right now, what I'm able to sell that ticket for, I am at 11x in value of my ticket price right now. Wow. And it's continually rising. And it's to the point where me and my brother are like, we're going to go to the game, but we might buy out of the supporter section because we would be stupid not to do it at this point. Like, it's gotten to that level where it's like, we can borderline pay for half of our season tickets if we sold this ticket and then bought ourselves back in. Like, it's gotten to that level. It's insane. So I think those are important just notes to like kind of think about when we're having this discussion, because I think there is a lot of variables when it comes down to this Messi discussion, because it is just a completely different animal compared to anything else we've ever had here. I mean, even the Beckham thing when it was at its peak, I remember seeing him at the Metrodome way back when and watching him come to town with Landon Donovan. They played the Minnesota Thunder way back when, and getting to see that. But that ticket, I think I got in for, like, our soccer team got invited and we got in there for free. And it was like, it was, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things where it's just one of those things where it's like MLS was just trying to get the word out at the time. This is a different animal. This is a money-making endeavor having him here. I mean, Apple helped foot the bill because I think MLS just across the board knew that, like, monetarily, this was just a can't miss situation. Sure. Apple knew it at the same time when they recruited him. So yeah, but you guys touched on the other couple points. Travel and fixture congestion, I think, play a role too with his availability and kind of making it a little bit more ambiguous than I think a lot of the ownership teams would probably like. But all in all, it's not a great situation for the people that are spending those $1,000 and then all of a sudden the guy's not showing up. You know what I mean? And it's just like, how do you justify that to fans? And I think it's kind of a slap in the face when you're Houston and, you know, you have people that are maybe buying resale tickets for that 500 to 1,000. And then all of a sudden you're like, here's a ticket to whatever game you want that's not in Miami, where it's like, you can come and watch, like, you guys like Quinn Sullivan? Like, it's not the same. So yeah,
I got the game on at the same
I
time.
do too. I'm hyped. That's the one I want. Like, if they're able to do it, them in the Galaxy, if they're able to do it, we would still have a full MLS side down on the bottom. Oh, it'd be great. So
yeah,
that would
screw the ticket prices. Let's talk about Champions Cup. All right.
But no, I appreciate you guys like, and kind of what your take was on it, because I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand with how I feel about it too. And I think it is important for anybody that is outside of the States to have the context to it, because it is, I mean, it's ridiculous. It is like, that's the one thing that I'll say about it. But it is part of it. I think that's just kind of what American sports is. When there's a spectacle that needs to be seen, there's always going to be the interest level there. And it's just a supply and demand thing, man. It's when people want to go see it, the demand goes up. And on this resale stuff, I mean, it's borderline like criminal. What some of this stuff is.
I think one of the biggest issues too, just one final point, is the fact that, you know, buying a ticket for Houston, for that home Houston game, and then not seeing Messi might make it so that you never want to watch the MLS ever again, potentially. A lot of
I'm dropping 1,000.
So it's like, we kind of have to, like, maybe the MLS has to come in and make a blanket wide way of, I think that it is good that all these teams have autonomy and have the authority to do what they want, and I think that that's kind of what should continue. But I think that maybe Messi is too big of a beast to
and that's one of the questions that I put in. I'm actually like, because that was the last thing that I was going to discuss, but I was going to cut it just based on time. But since you touched on it, I mean, how severe of like a step should MLS take for something like that? Is it if Messi comes to town, should teams disallow reselling of tickets, or like only allowing them to be like straight transfer to friends and family if you can't go? Like, how do you handle that? Like, should a friend be able to go? Like, I mean, it's what is the way to stop that? Because I agree, I don't think unless you did something that unless it was like that severe, I don't really think there's a way to bottle it up. Like,
I think it's on the individual teams, and then teams should just take a page out of the book of the other teams and what they're doing. I feel like if they try to blanket something and they mess it up, you're just compounding the problem.
Exactly, yeah. But I think that Messi is one of the only players that I think that we could raise that question of should we bring in the MLS to do a blanket thing? And I think that there's 100% going to be more problems down the line with this, and especially with Messi getting up in age, and even people getting mad that he might be out injured, and spending so much money to go see him. So I think that this question is going to be something that we're going to keep on seeing as long as Messi's in the league, and obviously as it stands, unless MLS does something like blanketly, we're just going to keep seeing either good things like Minnesota has been doing, or we're going to see a couple L's like Houston had.
Sure.
Yep.
No, that makes sense. Well, there you have it, guys. The ticket prices. Houston gets a free ticket for missing Messi. I would not be happy about that. Before we wrap up and get into the predictions, just one last shout. US Open Cup starts this week, or next week, on the 11th or the 18th to the 20th. That is the first round. Underdog Spotlight. You want to just do a couple seconds on Harpos FC? That's an easy name, Harpos.
Right. I did a quick scan because I did notice. I saw when I was scrolling through Twitter earlier that that it does start up here in the next week or so, and obviously U.S. Open Cup being our longest standing tradition when it comes to soccer in the States. So I think a lot of people hold it near and dear just from that angle of like, there's not a whole ton of history here in the States for soccer. It's kind of like segmented amongst a various level of different leagues that have come and gone. And this is kind of the lone thing that's kind of stood the test of time, this entirety of this time. So the opening rounds are obviously going to be, there is some professional teams involved. It's pretty much like USL teams. And then anything else that's classified as like semi-pro or pro. And then you would have teams below that subset of leagues. So under USL 2, and they're kind of positioned. So you'll have at this level through the qualifying rounds, you will have some amateur teams that are making it in. And I wanted to highlight one of them specifically. I just there was a couple, but I highlighted one and just did a little research on it. And as we go, if there's anybody making a long-term cup run, we'll make sure to shine some light on some of those teams that are doing God's work and making their way into these tournaments and making the stories. But Harpos FC, a team based out of Boulder, Colorado, has qualified for the first round. They will be playing a first-round matchup against El Paso Locomotive, so a USL championship side. So for anybody unfamiliar, that would be a second-tier team, considering. So that is actually a pretty tough draw for a team that is considered amateur. They were formed back in 1997, so they've been around, and they've played in the U.S. Open Cup a number of times. They've qualified a couple times, so it is considered a pretty successful amateur club. Cool. It was formed by undergraduates at the University of Colorado Boulder, and the furthest finish they've ever had in the history of the club in the Open Cup was the second round in 2015. They did actually win their first round matchup. It looked like it was against BYU, so I was a little confused on that. Where awesome. I think at a certain point, U.S. Open Cup had to have allowed collegiate involvement in some capacity, whether it was club or if it was actual collegiate teams. I'll be the first to admit that I do not have the U.S. Open Cup ball knowledge like I probably should, but I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit as well. But yeah, this team is from an amateur level pretty damn successful. Like I said, 31 trophies in its existence. I mean, they've been around since like the late 90s. So, I mean, do the math there. That's various league inclusions from that time, but it's like that team is just like whatever league they're playing in, for the most part, they're probably winning. So it's always kind of been that thing. And they play in a league called the United States Adult Soccer Association. So the USASA rolls off the tongue. And just one little thing from the club that I'll share that I just thought was kind of fun was who they identified they are as a club. So Harpos FC is the most authentic and respected soccer club in Colorado, uniting people, empowering opportunities, and giving back to our community. Our club has decades of experience in successfully developing and placing players in the college, pre-professional, and professional ranks. We are well connected with mutually beneficial relationships domestically and globally, which enables players to live their dreams, which I thought was a really cool sentiment on what was on their actual website. So yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out. Harpos FC, you have 3 fans here that will officially be cheering for you over El Paso Locomotive.
Wait, don't put that on me. Don't put that on me.
I'll take that mantle with you.
Dilla, big time El Paso fan. I forgot about it.
Yes. I love locomotives. I love.
Yeah, big time train guy over here. Exactly. But no, just I'm a sucker for those types of stories. I remember last year or 2 years ago, I think there was literally like a team that was sponsored by like a burrito restaurant that was an amateur team that made it like into the second round. So just stories like that are like I think why a lot of people, and there's consternation about how the Leagues Cup Open Cup battle is kind of ongoing with the federation. And these are the types of things where I think a lot of people that do truly enjoy the Open Cup like want these stories to be kind of brought to the light. And I think if there's one thing that the federation is not doing itself any favors on, is it's like the level of how I had to find this is just like, I shouldn't have to be going on Wikipedia and finding Harpos FC knowledge. This should be something that we should have somebody writing about this and talking about it. And it's a shame that we don't, because I feel like that's doing a disservice to the competition itself and where we're at with the Open Cup right now. So yeah, hopefully things change and we get to a better spot with it, because it would be great if the Open Cup does kind of become a little bit more of a mainstream U.S. soccer idea, because I feel like it's kind of on the periphery right now.
That could be our FA Cup. I mean, that's
the absolutely of it. It is. It's like if the FA Cup just had no media coverage whatsoever is pretty much where we're at with it right now. So
all right, well, you won me over. I'll be a Harpos FC fan. It would be interesting if they're playing at home too in that high altitude against El Paso. I don't know that.
Yeah, that I didn't look at.
The altitude of the locomotives, but I went when I went there for a wedding. I was getting dizzy, but that's me. Yeah. Before we finish off, we will do the predictions for the watch party, our next watch party, which will be March 23rd. Austin FC versus San Diego. Another California team getting shown some love. We've already watched them once before, beating my Galaxy. And
that's the early one too, I think, right?
12:30 p.m. Pacific time. And then the other 2 games that'll be a part of our bi-weekly predictions will be Minnesota United versus LA Galaxy.
Yes, sir.
Big game.
What I will be picking. And then Philadelphia Union against St. Louis City, or maybe Philadelphia Union against the Burkies. But those are your 3 choices. We will know during the watch party how the other games went, because those games are on Saturday. Austin FC and San Diego will be on Sunday. So what are we thinking for these predictions, guys? I'm going to ask, but I'm going to go first. I'll go with the 2 Saturday games first. I think I'm going to stay on the Philadelphia Union train against St. Louis City. I know, obviously, we're going to have another game this weekend to see how they do. Actually, who are they playing? I'm curious. Let me pull that up really quick. But I'm going to go with a Philadelphia Union win. It's hard for me to want to pick a tie in these. They play Nashville this week.
I know. I don't want to.
I get it.
I know. Yeah. Well,
it is smart to do it every now and again.
You did it in the first week. Minnesota and LA. Come on now. I'm going to go LA Galaxy against Minnesota.
I, for one, am shocked.
United. And then finally, Austin versus San Diego. Give me San Diego. So I'm going to pick 3 wins. San Diego, LA Galaxy, and Philadelphia. Seems kind of safe, but I'm leading, so I want to keep my lead.
Safe. Galaxy on the road is not safe.
I can't not pick them. That would be safe. Picks, you go.
Yeah, I'm not too far off from you, so I'll go with Philadelphia. I'll take Philadelphia over St. Louis.
The leader, I see. Okay.
With the home advantage. And then I'll take Minnesota. Take Biz's team over Galaxy. And then I will take San Diego over Austin.
What? You're going with Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota. Yep.
Very interesting. Biz, a quick update. How are the standings going so far?
Yeah. So let me do my picks, and then I just updated them, so I have them all squared away. But yeah, I will do exactly what picks just did. Philly win, San Diego win, and Minnesota win. Oh, I just want to double check. San Diego was at home that game, right? I want to double check.
I thought Austin was at home, but I'm not sure.
Or was Austin at home? You know what? With that one, then I'm bringing back the draws. We're coming back.
All right.
This is how.
I was gonna say why is third place copying second place? You'd be copying first place, but I guess you're not anymore. So
this is where we make our move. The draws are bringing us back.
Okay.
But yeah, so the official
Survivor. The tactics are coming out.
But the host record, so Dill is still riding a high on his first 2 weeks. Just kind of establishing that foundation. He's on a 6-3 record.
That's a majority of the weeks.
First 2 weeks, 5-1 through the first two. That helps. But 6-3 in total is where you are at. Pix and me are just doing our best to stay afloat here. I am sitting on those draws. Really set me back early on. 2-7 for me, and then 3-6 for Pixel. So Pix, you've pretty much been like one win each week. I was on the same pace if I wouldn't have done a draw. So, and then that's what we all did last week. Was we all went one.
What about how's the community doing? Are they beating you guys?
Community is officially. I got to double check how they're doing from week 3. I think they did something similar where they're going to be 1-2. They were 3-3 through week 2. I think off the top of my head they are officially 4-5 right now.
They went 1-2.
Yeah, 1-2. So 4-5 officially for the community.
So the community's in second.
Officially in second place, absolutely. So, and then the last thing that we wanted to introduce that I wanted to make sure that we do start kind of sporadically sprinkling in, because this is important and kind of like the thesis of what we had talked about when we had started to brainstorm.
We want to
this
move on
podcast
already
in general.
For me being in the league.
I mean, you have some more comments? Feel free.
No, that's it.
Feel free to gloat.
No, keep going.
All right. Fair enough. But with that, I wanted to make sure we kind of wanted to incorporate with the predictions. I think if going just into the games itself, I do think it's fun, obviously, to keep track of it as we go, and have this ability to kind of do the shit talking with each other as we go forward. And it gets really fun when you start getting into months and months of doing this, where the records start to get really
like 20
standing out. Right?
That's fun.
Yeah. So it does start to get to that point. But the thing that I wanted to incorporate was actually kind of some long-term predictions that we can actually hold ourselves accountable with just our own personal takes on just various things through North American soccer. So whether that's long-term predictions that we're coming back to in a year, whether that's something that we're coming back to halfway through the season, a year-end decision on somebody making the playoffs, personal player stats that you like are kind of like planting your flag on the hill, saying that so and so is going to make a World Cup roster or something along those lines. I think that's something that would be kind of a fun thing to keep track of as well. So that's something I wrote you guys a message to kind of task you with deciding on. It's not something you would have to come to the table with necessarily every week if you don't have something that you're firm on. But do either of you have something that you firmly believe you would like to add into the fold that I can keep track of, and that we will at some point give you either a letter grade or just kind of roast you or praise you based on whatever it is?
Yeah, I've got one. So
Hit me with it.
I believe that after the 2026 World Cup, which is quite a ways from now, but it's coming every single day. We're getting closer. After the 2026 World Cup, I think Kevin Mier is going to be the number one for Colombia, and I'm very much hopeful that will happen. We went over a little bit of his profile earlier. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a hope because he hasn't been given too many minutes, but I just want to see it happen, and I'm just putting it out there.
I'm going to tell my boy Cucho to text him some photos.
Get him off the roster.
Exactly.
Sabotage.
I like that.
And then another one I have, which is super short term.
I love it.
Yeah. This is super short term, so we'll probably be talking about it maybe next podcast. But I think for my nephew's first game, Red Bulls versus Orlando, I think Forsberg going to do either a goal or an assist to make him, Red Bulls fans for their first game. I think that they need to see, some excitement, and I think Forsberg is going to put on a show for them. So that's one of my predictions, is a goal contribution from Forsberg against Orlando this Saturday. So the day after this comes out.
All right.
I love it.
That.
I love it. Dill, do you have anything for us? With me, I know we spring this on everybody kind of like within a couple hours of the podcast. So if not,
Yeah,
it's all right.
I love being put on the spot.
I love it.
I have two. I'll go one, the more serious one first. BizarraBrigade will own a jersey with a player's name on it by the end of the 2025 calendar year. So that gives 8 months for that to happen. Will it be Kelvin Yeboah? Or will it be a 19-year-old player who he said, he definitely does not want to do? He does not want to have a teenager's name on his back. He was quoted to say that before the podcast started. You had to wait 2 hours for me to say that about him.
This is going to be one of those meme quotes where it's just me wearing the player's name on the back of the jersey and saying, like, would never wear 19-year-old jersey on my back.
And
I got one more in me like Vince Carter.
And, before I make this second prediction, it's going to be spicy. I think it comes from, the hate in my heart for some LA Galaxy rivalries. The top 7 make playoffs, right, Biz?
It'd be, all right. So top 9 would be, because you got the playing game with 8 and 9. So top 7 would technically make like the outright playoffs. Top 7 would be like you're making it in with no playing game.
I'm going to caveat it. Well, I'm not. Yeah, okay. San Jose Earthquakes are not going to be a top 7 Western Conference team.
Ooh, I like that.
Great
okay, that's
I like that.
Where does that come from? Not a ton of ball knowledge, just I know. That,
just a hunch, just a vibe. I like it though. These are the types of things that I want flags planted.
I need to drag the California teams down with me into the depths of where LA Galaxy is, just so I feel better about myself.
And it's gonna be exciting with our watch party on the what day is that, the 23rd, where we're watching San Diego. So
no, I said San Jose. San Jose.
Oh, okay.
San Jose, yeah.
I always confuse the two.
In 2 weeks, I will also drag San Diego down.
Okay.
Yeah, but I need some more info. Biz, what about you? Do you have any? Did you?
I have one.
Us to have none?
Only one.
Yep. Absolutely. No, I do have one, and I've actually kind of referenced this, and I'm actually going to extend past it, where I had mentioned I think it might have been last podcast where I said, and once I provided context with reminding you guys that there's 9 playoff teams, that then you guys were kind of like, oh yeah, I probably agree. But I'm going to actually say that I do think with the equity that I've seen from San Diego over these first couple of games, I think that team is going to be a top 4 team in the West. And that's contingent. I will throw a variable on there with one more designated player signing in the summer. So if not, I do think I'm going to like caveat it to saying that team will just be a playoff team. I don't know where it would end. But if they sign one more player, I don't care who it is. It could be a defender. It could be a goalie. Like it doesn't matter. If they sign one more player and throw money at something, that team is a top 4 team in the West this year with how they are constructed currently and with just the landscape of the rest of the MLS right now. That is a really good team that I've watched now a couple 90 minutes worth of. I love just like, I love how much of a connected team they feel like. I love just like their style of play. They have an identity and all the players are bought into said identity. That's something that you don't see at this point of the season very, very often, especially out of an expansion side. I think it's really cool to see. So that is going to be my bold call, is top 4 contingent on a designated player signing in the summer. Otherwise, they will I'll say top 6. If they don't, they will make top 6 otherwise, because that's bold enough. But
and you still got Minnesota at 3?
Still got Minnesota at 3, yes, sir. I should probably add that too, right?
Yeah.
I said it.
No, we're holding you accountable for that one. We can that.
They will make top 6 if no DP. So, yep, and then Minnesota, top 3 in the West. That's with a bullet. I don't even, honestly, we should just hang that behind me. That's just not even a question.
You should get it tatted.
Get it on the back of my jersey.
Get the arm, 3rd place trophy, like Jason Terry on the Mavericks.
Just the guy celebrating on the 3rd place podium.
Oh yeah.
That's me, 100%. All right, we got some stuff to like kind of marinate here for the season. We'll start adding a couple of those. I'll brainstorm a couple more ideas. I would love the community too to like start just throwing some against the wall as well. And then maybe we pick like some ones that we like, and like I can even just kind of like identify usernames and just kind of give them a special shout out for a couple that we like. So I'll start incorporating that too. If you guys are listening and you want to do it, the Discord, which is linked below in the YouTube, or if you're on, I don't know. we'll shout it out on the Spotify, but we do have a Discord. Find one of our other socials if you're listening to the actual podcast, if you're interested in following us. But Discord is very interactive. You'll be able to be a part of that stuff and be a part of the community picks, all that good stuff. But we'll start having you guys do some as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be going to that game, so I'm going to be showing some match day photos as well.
Love it.
Sent some him in the Ushanka, which is really nice. So I wonder what we're going to get for the Orlando game.
I love it. You guys saw the Fear the Loon tifo from me and on the opener, so more of that to come as well. And on top of it too, some of the trapper hats for me and Brother Biz for the giveaway. Nice. I mean, like that was nice. Fashionable.
I love those. Fashionable.
Yeah. Probably one of the best giveaways we've ever done. To be honest, those were very good. Honestly, should have worn it for that's on me. Should have worn it for the podcast.
That would have been nice. Yeah. Maybe you can put a 3 on it when they get third place at the end of the season. That'd be cool. Bronze 3. All right. Well, there you have it, guys. A meaty episode to cover the first 3 weeks. Well, week 2 and 3 of the MLS and some surrounding bits. Grab bag was fun. I enjoyed the conversation about the tickets. Guys, like Biz said, make sure to follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow the Discord, or follow the Spotify, and get in the Discord. However way you want to interact, we really appreciate the support. I feel like we're finding our stride in this, and as the MLS season keeps going, we will have more stories to tell. So see us next time on our watch party live on the YouTube page and Twitch page, so follow that as well, on March 23rd, 12 p.m. Pacific time for a 12:30 p.m. Pacific time start for Austin FC and San Diego FC. But other than that, we appreciate you guys as always, and this has been the Something About Soccer podcast. We will see you in the next one. Peace.